Chapter 1127. Back in the day, the Nangong family had an extraordinary influence in Beijing, but they often wandered in the gray area. Because of this, an actress that Elder Mo was familiar with was implicated and ended up losing her life. As a result, Elder Mo cooperated with the police and captured the Nangong family in one fell swoop. He even provided strong evidence and sent Elder Mo to prison. Following the decline of the Nangong family, the entire entertainment industry and Beijing rarely mentioned them. But with Nangong Quan's return, it was time to bring up the matter again. Nangong Quan's return was to make the Mo family suffer. Mo Ting wasn't afraid of anything. After all, Elder Mo's actions were not wrong. But his weakness was Tongning. Tongning could see the worry in Mo Ting's eyes, so she teased, "Is President Mo afraid? Get some rest." Mo Ting did not respond. He simply hugged her and laid down on the bed, cuddling her to sleep. Tongning wasn't an ordinary woman. Whether it was physically or mentally, she was stronger than other women. This was something that Mo Ting was never worried about. A few days later, Nangong Quan officially held a press conference to announce his identity as the executive chairman of Spring Fall Film and Television. He also wished Parasite a success. As soon as Tongning saw this man on the entertainment news, she couldn't help but be cautious. She liked to see a person's soul through their eyes. But this man's eyes were filled with a sense of vicissitudes and sharpness. So, his appearance naturally became a hot topic in the industry. It was obvious that he was targeting Hai Rui. It was obvious from the incident with Parasite. After Elder Mo saw the news, he immediately gave Mo Ting a phone call. "Did the rascal from the Nangong family cause trouble for you? Didn't you see everything on the news?" "I'm asking about something else," Elder Mo humphed. The old man harumphed. "These little tricks are exactly the same as his grandfather's. They're not worth mentioning at all. They haven't done anything yet," Mo Ting replied. "This rascal may be even more powerful than Elder Mo. You guys should be careful. I think you should worry about yourself," Mo Ting said before he hung up the phone. "This rascal," Elder Mo humphed before he also hung up the phone. Afterwards, Luce knocked on the office door and handed an invitation to Mo Ting. "President, it's from Spring Fall Film." Mo Ting received the invitation. After taking a glance at it, he tossed it to the side. "Nangong Quan wants to meet. Are you going?" "Of course, I have to go to reminisce about the past." "In that case, should we tell the madam about this?" Luce asked as he glanced at the invitation beside Mo Ting. Mo Ting froze for a moment before nodding his head. Of course. From Mo Ting's point of view, although he was worried about Tongning, he had never treated her like a woman. After all, her ability to think was not inferior to any man. So, he decided to tell her about this, so she could be mentally prepared. That night, after returning home, Mo Ting told Tongning about Nangong Quan's invitation and asked, "Do you want to come with me? After all, I can only feel at ease with you by my side." At this time, Tongning shook her head. "The day after tomorrow, still at noon. Go ahead. I'll stay at home, so you don't have to worry." "All right, but I still feel like something isn't right." Tongning was a little confused. She felt like there was something she couldn't quite put her finger on. "Zichen's return visit is the day after tomorrow," Mo Ting reminded. "Yes," Tongning snapped out of her daze. "I will send more people the day after tomorrow. Take some bodyguards and follow Mom and Zichen." "Okay," Tongning nodded. Tongning gave Xia Yuling a phone call and told her to be on guard. At least, she needed to be aware of danger. Xia Yuling, on the other hand, was a lot more relaxed. "I know how to be on guard and I will protect my grandson. But you guys don't need to be too nervous about this. Things are not the same as 20 years ago." Tongning knew she was making a big deal out of nothing. But who knew what Nangong Quan's bottom line was? After all, they had never fought against each other before. Plus, Nangong Quan was a fierce bandit. 2 days later, Mo Ting and Nangong Quan met again at Dynasty Hotel. Nangong Quan, dressed in a gray suit, welcomed Mo Ting with a smile. "Long time no see." Mo Ting removed his suit jacket and sat down opposite Nangong Quan. The two handsome men immediately attracted the attention of the opposite sex in the hotel. President Nangong has arrived with a big group of people. Why didn't your wife come with you? I should have explained the incident with Glory to her. Nangong Quan replied elegantly. Nangong Quan replied politely. My men didn't handle this matter well, so I'm sure sister-in-law is upset. My son went for a follow-up today, so my wife went with him. Mo Ting replied calmly. As for the incident with Glory, although I didn't gain anything, I didn't lose anything either. Beijing has changed a lot since I returned this time. The industry is now your world, Nangong Quan chuckled. President Nangong, did you ask me how to catch up on the old days? Of course I did. After all, the only people I know in Beijing are the Mo family. Now that I'm back with my daughter, it's only right for me to meet up with old friends. Otherwise, my daughter won't be able to find a place to visit. Wouldn't she be lonely during the holidays? The conversation between the two men was simply a way to test each other. It was all psychological warfare. If you have something to say, then say it. After all, I don't think Elder Nangong did anything wrong in the past. Mo Ting took the initiative and said straightforwardly. Mo Ting took the initiative and put it more bluntly. I don't think the Mo family owes you anything. I never said that the Mo family owes me anything. I only asked you out because you're the only person I can talk to. As for a parasite, it is a business matter that is handled by professionals, so I can't say that I know everything, Nangong Quan explained. Mo Ting, even if I want to cause trouble for you, I will do it openly. Others may not know, but I know you well. Plus, I have a daughter now. It wasn't easy for me to get to where I am today. I don't want my daughter to lose her father because of a past grudge. Let's meet up more often from now on. I'll make you trust me. Whether Mo Ting trusted him or not, he still needed to be cautious. After all, Nangong Quan wasn't the only one who had the final say in the Nangong family. Back then, the Nangong family had a lot of power and influence. So, when Elder Nangong went to prison, a lot of people were implicated. However, they had been biding their time until now. Now that Nangong Quan was back, they had a new leader. So, how could they not wait for an opportunity to strike? Chapter 1128. The meal passed peacefully, and Mo Zichen's follow-up went smoothly. So, Tongning let out a sigh of relief. Seeing that her son was fine, she finally relaxed. But, on the way home, Xia Yuling's car was intercepted by two black cars. At the time, Mo Zichen was sitting in the back. Xia Yuling immediately stopped in her tracks. She was stuck in the alleyway and did not dare to move. A moment later, 4 or 5 thugs jumped out of the car with sticks in their hands. Without waiting for Xia Yuling to say anything, they began to smash the car. Tongning chased after them with her bodyguards. The thugs calmly returned to their car and drove off. Tongning immediately pulled open the car door and helped Xia Yuling out. She then carried Mo Zichen in her arms. Are you all right? I'm fine. I'm not sure if I scared Zichen. I never expected that the Nangong family would resort to such underhanded methods. What kind of society is this? How can they still be so violent? Let's talk at home. Tongning carried Zichen in her arms and escorted Xia Yuling safely back to the Tang family home. I was scared to death. I'm sorry, Mom. Tongning apologized as she comforted Zichen. It's not your fault. But when he thought about it, he couldn't help but feel scared. Not long after, Tongning gave Mo Ting a phone call and told him everything that happened in the alley. After picking up the phone, Mo Ting's expression did not change, but he was obviously not as relaxed as before. I just had a call from my wife. My son was attacked on his way back. Is that so? Hurry back and have a look, Nangong Quan urged. And Mo Ting scoffed as he stood up from his seat. From now on, if you want to launch a sneak attack or surround me, it's best if you come after me. Kids can't handle the fear. If something really happens, the Nangong family will disappear from the face of the earth. Fight me fair and square. Only then will I respect you as an opponent. Nangong Quan did not say a word as he watched Mo Ting leave. Afterwards, he made a phone call to the agency. Who told you to get revenge on the Mo family? Young master, Uncle Chio, we live in a lawful society, not a violent society. Why did you have to do something so despicable? Nangong Quan asked angrily. We'll talk about it when I get back. Nangong Quan may have been cruel in the past, but he now had a daughter and knew how to be gentle. Plus, bullying someone was the lowest form. Even if he won, what glory was there? So, as soon as he returned to the agency, he went to see Chiu Jin. Why didn't you listen to me? Young master, we've endured for so many years, waiting for you to come back, just to find trouble with the Mo family. Have you forgotten the pain the Mo family brought you? I haven't forgotten. But what's the point of scaring Mo Ting's son today? Mo King. Mo Ting, you with his of. Mo was of young master. If you really want to win against Hai Rui, then help me build a bigger empire than Hai Rui and produce something better than the Ant Queen. Don't even think about using underhanded methods. They won't have any effect on Mo Ting. That's the only way you can truly crush the Mo family. Nangong Quan's voice was a little too loud, so little Eggshell, who was resting outside, immediately pushed open the door and looked at her father. Daddy, why are you so fierce? Nangong Quan glared at Chiu Jin before he stood up and walked over to his daughter and picked her up in his arms. I'm sorry, baby. Daddy will try his best to control himself from now on. If they weren't fighting on the same side, it didn't matter if they won or lost. So, what sense of revenge or victory did they have? Perhaps I'm getting old, and I don't understand the thoughts of the young. I've waited all these years for you to come back and take everyone to the Mo family for revenge. But I don't think the young master's heart is on this. You can forget about the death of your family, but I can't. After speaking, Chiu Jin left the office, leaving the father and daughter behind. Of course, Nangong Quan didn't approve of Chiu Jin's actions, but he wouldn't go so far as to tip off his enemies. So, he told someone to keep an eye on Chiu Jin. After all, the Nangong family owed Chiu Jin a favor, and he would never forget that. Mo Ting quickly returned home. Seeing that his wife and son were safe, his expression softened. Tongning pounced in Mo Ting's arms as Mo Ting patted her on the back. I'm glad you're okay. Mom was still scared. Let's go, we'll talk about it at home. Mo Ting escorted Tongning back to Hyatt Regency. But from Nangong Quan's reaction, it was obvious that he didn't think the incident this time had anything to do with him. But he still had to be straightforward. Even if Nangong Quan is a criminal, he is a gentleman. Is that a compliment to an enemy? Tongning laughed. If he actually competed with you in the business world, it would have been a great show. But if he was actually aware of what happened, then there's no point talking about him anymore. I told Lu Che to do a deeper investigation on Nangong Quan. Mo Ting replied. He then asked, is our son okay? He's fine. The little rascal was born with a calm demeanor. I can't do anything about him. If it was Zishi, he would have burst into tears by now. That's good. Meanwhile, Chiu Jin suffered at Nangong Quan's hands, so all he could do was drink in his office. He had endured for so many years, all because he wanted to get revenge on the Mo family and get justice for his family. But why didn't Nangong Quan have any plans to do so? Was he still a descendant of the Nangong family? Master Chiu, if the young master doesn't want to make a move, we can make a move on our own. After all, we can't rely on the young master anymore. So in for a penny, in for a pound. You make it sound so simple. Chiu Jin humphed. Do you think the Mo family are easy to deal with? Even when they smashed up the car today, didn't you hear from the people that came back that Tongning followed them the entire time with bodyguards? The Mo family have always been cunning, Chiu Jin's subordinate replied. We need to plan this matter carefully. It won't be easy to deal with them from the front. Let's see if we can find an opportunity in the industry. After all, Tongning is still active in the industry. I refuse to believe that she won't be alone one day. Master Chiu is right. As long as we don't let the young master find out when the time comes, everything will be fine. Now that I think about it, Springfall was founded by Master Chiu. The reason he gave it to the young master was because he wanted to use it for revenge. But he actually took it seriously. By the time he overtook Hai Rui, he would be in his 70s or 80s. Wouldn't he be letting his enemy live comfortably until they were old? Chapter 1129. Xiao glared at his subordinate and smashed the glass in his hand. I've already allowed the Mo family to live for so many years. I'm not going to allow them to continue living comfortably. Continue to keep an eye on them. Nangong Quan's daughter, Little Eggshell, was a little over a year older than the twins. But she was a very sensitive girl and was able to accurately express her emotions. This was rare at her age. After all, most children were mischievous at the age of 4 or 5. Little Eggshell seemed to empathize with Nangong Quan and knew that he had something on his mind. So, every day, after finishing her homework, she would wait for her father to return home, no matter how late it was. That night, Little Eggshell overheard the conversation between her father and Xiao. So, as soon as she returned home, she hugged onto Nangong Quan's leg. "Daddy, Grandfather Xiao made you angry because he wanted to hurt someone, right?" Eggshell, "Daddy, will Grandfather Xiao cause other children to lose their mothers?" Little Eggshell asked as she lifted her head. "No," Nangong Quan patted her on the head. "Daddy promises. Daddy won't let Grandfather Xiao do anything rash. Children without mothers are very pitiful," Little Eggshell said as she furrowed her brows. All of Nangong Quan's love came from this little angel. She was his motivation to continue living. "Don't worry, Daddy won't let other children lose their mothers." So, even though Nangong Quan said that he wouldn't let the Mo family know, when he thought about Xiao reaction and the Mo family's 3 children, he decided to give Mo Ting a phone call in front of Little Eggshell. "I told you earlier today that I won't seek revenge. Even if I have to retaliate, I will defeat you directly. But Mo Ting, just because I won't, doesn't mean that my grandfather's former subordinates won't. You and your wife better be careful." After hearing Nangong Quan's warning, Mo Ting chuckled. "Rather than letting us be careful, you should be more careful. Elder Nangong's former subordinates went through so much to bring you back, yet you don't have the heart to seek revenge. How long do you think they'll tolerate you? If they really disregard everything, what do you think your biggest weakness is?" Nangong Quan subconsciously glanced at Little Eggshell. Of course, Mo Ting's reminder struck Mo Ting's heart. Xiao already had a grudge against him, so if things really escalated to the point of falling out, the first thing he needed to ensure was Little Eggshell's safety. As she sat beside Mo Ting and listened to the conversation between Nangong Quan and Mo Ting, she suddenly laughed. "Why do I feel like the two of you are so similar? Originally, we could have been friends," Mo Ting said as he put down his phone and hugged her. "From the looks of the situation, it's not Nangong Quan that we need to be wary of, but the clowns behind us." So, not only Tongning, but Hai Rui also stepped up their security. Meanwhile, Xiao Sen's daughter had requested 3 months of leave from Tongning. Meanwhile, Tongning had already flown to the U.S. for training as a director. And right now, Tongning was also building her new team, Starshine. Even though she had gathered all the geniuses together, she still had to go through intensive training. Otherwise, she would not be able to directly utilize their talents. While the Ant Queen 2 was being prepared, the crew of Parasite officially entered the filming phase. Apart from Tongning and Springfall, a lot of other film companies were also getting involved in the production of sci-fi films. But they all sent Hai Rui invitations to invite Tongning to be their consultant. It was obvious that they all wanted to produce a good sci-fi film, but their actions received a lot of support from the public. At least, they were no longer the same as before, where they would make a shoddy film just to fill in the gaps in the genre. The success of The Ant Queen was like a wake-up call to the public. They now knew how much the public craved good films, and Tongning provided them with the best results. As a result, Tongning's name became synonymous with quality in every aspect of the entertainment industry. As long as Tongning was involved, regardless of whether it was an actor or a film, it meant that the film was of high quality, because she was the best detector for bad films. As a result, Tongning realized that she now had a greater say. But because of her increased responsibility, she had less time to speak. Under these circumstances, if another film and television agency came looking for her, would she be able to accept them? The answer was of course not. The film industry had always been uneven and sci-fi films required a lot of investment. So, Tongning didn't want to hold others to the same standards as the Ant Queen. She was willing to go bankrupt, but did others have the guts to take the gamble? So, Tongning asked Immerse to reject her as a consultant on her behalf. So, as her manager, Immerse naturally helped her avoid any problems. Tongning is already re-signed with Hai Rue. Their contract states that an artist can only work for the agency for the rest of their life, at least for the duration of their contract. As a result, Tongning cannot participate in the production of other companies' films. Tongning is currently working on the Ant Queen 2, but she is merely a staff member of the film industry. She is not a god. I hope you won't hold her to the standards of a god. At the same time, she is also a mother of 3 children. She will spend most of her time taking care of them and educating them. All in all, even though a lot of people believe that Tongning could guide the production of other companies' sci-fi films, the chances of this happening weren't high. But this also proved how many supporters Tongning had at the moment. She wasn't someone that could be compared to a superstar or an international supermodel. Her existence was already representative of the arts. Of course, because of the Ant Queen, the public was a lot more tolerant of Tongning than before. This was what people meant when they said, "One's work speaks for itself." Most importantly, Tongning was no different from how she was in the past, yet she kept a lower profile. She still remembered where she stood, so it was no wonder that many people, both domestically and overseas, viewed her as an idol. However, Tongning had been living in seclusion for a long time and did not give Qiu-Jin chance. This made Qiu-Jin anxious. After Immerse's eyes recovered, Tongning brought them home. After all, children with parents to take care of them were more confident and safe. This was a very important thing. Of course, before they knew it, it was time for the 2 brothers to go to school. So, Immerse had already made arrangements for them. In order not to cause a commotion, the 2 brothers used their English names instead of their Chinese names and try not to let their classmates know who their parents were. He simply wanted to give them a low-profile learning environment. Chapter 11:30. Although Tongning had previously revealed her identity at the Zhai family's wedding, the children's appearances were constantly changing. So, it wasn't too difficult to hide their identities. Because of this, Tongning hired a helper to be their home tutor and take them home every day. As a result, the 2 brothers ended up attending Beijing's Huanglin Academy, the best public school in the country. Regardless of their family background, the children there would be judged by their grades. So, the 2 brothers were going to suffer. Of course, there was one unsurprising coincidence. Nangong Quan's daughter, Little Eggshell, also attended the same school. She was just a year ahead of the 2 brothers. Other people's children were personally taken to school by their parents so that the teachers would know their children's identities and take care of them. But the MO couple did not. Their son needed to be trained from a young age and couldn't be as delicate as a girl. So, Immerse was ruthless. Back when he was a few years old, his English was already very fluent. So how bad could his son be? But the reality was Immerse got along well with his classmates, but Immerse didn't. After all, Zichen's eye was injured and his scar was still there. So, both boys and girls did not dare to get too close to him. But Immerse didn't care. But not too long after starting school, the 2 brothers still got into trouble. There was a chubby boy in their class that liked to bully Zichen. Because of the scar on his face, the chubby boy was slightly older than the other kids, so he was able to communicate better. "You're so ugly. You're the ugliest kid in our class." Zichen continued to play with his building blocks and ignored the chubby boy. "My mom said you're mute. Only mutes don't talk." After Zichen went to the bathroom, he saw the chubby boy laughing at his brother. So, he immediately threw a punch at him. Don't talk about my brother." Zichen may not have expressed how Zichen got his injury, but he knew that his brother had protected him. So, now that his brother was being bullied, he naturally had to stand in front of him and protect him. Then, the little fatty was beaten to tears. He called his teacher to complain, "Teacher, they beat me." At the time, the teacher in charge of the class tried her best to investigate the background of the children. She even found out that the chubby boy's mother was the boss of a hotel chain. However, The two brothers were picked up by a sister in a cheap car every day, so they couldn't be from a rich family. Therefore, she naturally sided with the chubby boy. You two, you're so young, yet you don't learn good things. How did you learn to beat people up? Call your parents. As this was the first time, when news of the incident reached the ears of the MO couple, Tongning simply let out a laugh. Our son hit someone. Miss Tang, it was actually the other party's fault. Zishi was simply protecting Zichin. Su Yuran replied. This woman was a retired soldier and had good fighting skills. So, Tongning hired her because she liked her. She squatted down and pinched her son's cheeks. At school, they're the only ones without any backing, so they will definitely be bullied. Why didn't you reveal your identity? Our background can protect them, but can also cause them a lot of trouble. I'd rather they stay like this and protect each other than be surrounded by reporters, Tongning replied. When they get a little older, they'll understand. Su Yuran nodded her head. You're right. So, the two little idiots had to protect each other and continue their daily life of being bullied. But the two idiots attended the same school as Little Eggshell. Although they didn't know each other, the subordinate that Nangong Quan sent to and from school on behalf of Nangong Quan had seen the two rascals walk out of school hand in hand. At first, he thought they looked familiar. But when he thought about it carefully, he remembered that he had seen them at the Zhai family's wedding. So, he told Nangong Quan about it. But Nangong Quan did not react. They were in the same school, not the same grade or the same class. As long as they didn't interact with each other, it was fine. But Qiu Jin ended up overhearing this. He tried everything he could think of from Tongning, but he couldn't find the right opportunity. Now that he found out the two rascals were at Huanglin College, wasn't he just going to wear out iron shoes to find them? Look at how cunning the MO family are. No one has any idea that their children are actually at Huanglin College. But the school is heavily guarded and there are people taking them to and from school. It's not easy for us to find the right opportunity. Qiu Jin took a deep puff of his cigarette and threw it onto the ground. He then stepped on it. In that case, we'll follow the cars and make our move when we see a suitable location. Okay, we'll do as you say. No one knew that Qiu Jin had his eyes on the two MO family babies. Of course, they had no idea how good Su Yuran's fighting skills were. So, they had to see for themselves. They thought she was just a weak little sister taking the twins to and from school. In order to cause trouble for the two, Qiu Jin camped outside the school for a few days. After confirming with his own eyes that Su Yuran was the only one there and no one from the MO family, he decided to make his move on Friday afternoon. After all, he already knew the route Su Yuran would take the kids home. But Qiu Jin never expected that Little Eggshell would see him squatting down in the car. As soon as Little Eggshell returned home, she reported to Nangong Quan, Daddy, I saw Grandfather Qiu at the school gates today. Are you sure you saw, right? Nangong Quan asked as he carried Little Eggshell onto his lap. I saw him a few times, I'm sure. Why did Grandfather Qiu come to our school? What else could he do? Of course, he was here for the twins. Eggshell, you don't need to worry about anything. Just promise Daddy that when you're in danger, you'll stay away. Okay? You need to know that Daddy can't survive without you. Although Little Eggshell couldn't understand Nangong Quan's emotions, she agreed to his every request. However, she still felt that Grandfather Qiu was acting strange. Plus, he kept staring at the twins. Was he planning to do something bad? With this thought, Little Eggshell secretly made a plan. She would definitely notice Grandfather Qiu's movements and give the two boys a warning. To be honest, it was because the two boys were really cute, especially the one that didn't like to talk. He was just like her father. Chapter 1131. Over the next 2 days, not only did Little Eggshell find out which classroom the twins attended, but she also found out their English names. Until Friday afternoon after school, Little Eggshell deliberately followed behind the brothers because she wanted to take another look at them. But as soon as the brothers boarded their car, she noticed that Qiu Jin's car had left with them. Little Eggshell immediately found the driver who would take her to school. Uncle, hurry up and follow Grandpa Qiu's car. Miss, follow them. If Dad asks, tell him it was my idea. As Little Eggshell grew up without a mother by her side, She was very sensitive, and she expressed herself very accurately. Nangong Kwan's subordinates had no choice but to follow Chiu Jin's car from afar. Chiu Jin wanted to stop Su Yuran while she drove to a secluded area. In reality, he did exactly that. Just like last time, Xia Yuling stopped Zichen on the way to the hospital. A screeching sound could be heard. Su Yuran was intercepted by a black car. Then, 5 men got off the black car with iron rods in their hands. "We're not looking for you. We're looking for the 2 brothers in your car." Su Yuran turned her head and glanced at the 2 brothers in the car as she comforted them. "Auntie needs to get out of the car to deal with some matters. Be good and stay in the car. Don't move around, okay?" Mo Zishi and Mo Zichen stretched their necks, but they still nodded their heads obediently. Su Yuran took this opportunity to get out of the car. Without a trace of panic, she simply put on a pair of black boxing gloves. Just 5 people. Seeing Su Yuran's stance, the men guessed that she had some skills and were a little afraid. But at this time, Chiu Jin ordered, "What are you waiting for? Arrest him." The 4 men rushed towards Su Yuran, but the man in the lead was sent flying by a beautiful roundhouse kick from Su Yuran. As for the other 3 men, they froze in place. This level of skill. She wasn't just a professional, was she? Charge! The men soon got into a scuffle. At this time, Chiu Jin took the opportunity to run to the back of the car. He wanted to open the door on the left and carry the brothers out. But Little Eggshell's car caught up to them. Before the car came to a complete stop, Little Eggshell asked the driver to drive for her. "Uncle, help them. Help them." "Miss." The driver felt helpless. "Otherwise, I'll tell Dad that you bullied me." What was the driver supposed to do? He could only obediently get out of the car and let Little Eggshell run out. He knew that Chiu Jin wouldn't hurt her. "Grandfather Chiu, go. Go." Little Eggshell immediately ran forward and bit Chiu Jin's arm. She then closed the car door and stood in front of the brothers. "Kai, why are you here?" This was Little Eggshell's real name, Nangong Kai. Chiu Jin held his hand in pain as he looked at Eggshell. Yuran Chiu Eggshell. Meanwhile, Su Yuran had successfully dealt with the 4 men and was about to capture Chiu Jin. "Big sister, don't hurt Grandpa Chiu, okay?" Su Yuran tilted her head and looked at Little Eggshell. The little girl only knew how to protect others. So, she threw Chiu Jin to the side. "If it wasn't for the fact that you're a little girl, I would have broken all your ribs today. I'm going to be fired." Chiu Jin crawled up from the ground and ran away with his men. At this time, Little Eggshell's driver arrived to pick her up. "Miss, let's go. If we don't go home soon, I'm going to get fired." Little Eggshell glanced at the 2 brothers in the car and relaxed before she left with her driver. But this little girl left a deep impression in Su Yuran's heart. Of course, the Mo brothers probably felt the same way. Soon, news of Chiu Jin causing trouble spread throughout the 2 families, even though Chiu Jin didn't gain anything out of it. After all, he never expected Su Yuran to be so good at martial arts. No wonder Tongning trusted a girl to escort her sons to and from school. Meanwhile, Nangong Quan called Chiu Jin into his office and handed him a block of ice. "Put this on your face." "Oomph. I've heard everything from Little Eggshell. Uncle Chiu, can't you just stop? I've waited for over 20 years, yet you're telling me to stop? Nangong Quan, you can do it. You can forget how your family died, but I can't. I can't forget how my wife and unborn child died. Uncle Chiu, in the past, Grandpa lived a dangerous life. Have you ever thought about the families that Grandpa hurt and the people that died because of him? Especially Elder Mo's confidant, that female celebrity. Who are they going to get revenge on? I don't care. I know you've been unhappy with me ever since I returned. How about this? I'll give Springfall back to you. From now on, you get your revenge, and I'll live my life." Nangong Quan said, "Uncle Chiu, I'm grateful that you waited for me all these years. But the revenge that I want is fair and square." After speaking, Nangong Quan stood up and gave up his position as "You don't need to go. My brother gave me the money to start this company. I'm leaving." After speaking, Chiu Jin turned around and left the office without looking back. But asking him to give up on revenge was a fool's dream. Late at night, Hyatt Regency. After coaxing the kids to sleep, Tongming entered Ting's study room and sat down beside him. Luckily, Yuran was here today. I also need to thank the daughter of the Nangong family. However, I still insist that grandfather didn't do anything wrong. I never thought that Nangong Quan's daughter would be so understanding at such a young age. She's a good girl. I'll deal with the aftermath. Don't worry, Ting replied. Ting, rather than sitting around and waiting for death, I think it's better to find Qiujin and talk to him openly. It's better than him plotting against us every time, Tongming suggested. I don't want to sit around and wait for death. After all, a child's life isn't something to be trifled with. I'll find an opportunity to make arrangements. Ting nodded. On Monday morning, Tongming prepared a cake and handed it to the two brothers. She then knelt down and said, "You need to give this to the lady that saved you the other day, okay? You can't eat it yourself." Zishi nodded his head in a daze. Meanwhile, Zichin did not say a word. Yuran, sorry to trouble you. Su Yuran held onto the two kids' hands and smiled. It's fine. I'll take them to thank the little girl. Tongming stood up and watched as the trio left. At times, she wondered if this was an ill-fated relationship, the daughter of her enemy. It was already good enough that they didn't fight when they saw each other. Who would have thought that they would be involved in something like this? Chapter 1132. Soon, the three of them arrived at the school gates. At this time, Little Eggshell also stepped out of the car. However, this time, Nangong Quan was the one that dropped her off. Su Yuran did not think too much into it. Of course, she had no idea about the grudge between Nangong Quan and the Mo family. So, she held on the hands of the two kids and asked them to hand over the cake. How should you greet your savior? Two young gentlemen. Zichin didn't move, but Zishi was very honest. He handed the cake to Little Eggshell. Nangong Quan didn't know what to say, and Little Eggshell looked at her father, unsure if she should accept it. After a while, Nangong Quan finally relented. Take it, sir. You have taught your daughter well. Nangong Quan glanced at Su Yuran. After confirming that she was the martial artist, he looked at her meaningfully before he left with Little Eggshell, who was holding onto the cake box. Su Yuran was a little confused, so as she drove the two brothers home, she mentioned it to Tongming. After hearing this, Tongming laughed. You probably don't pay attention to him, so you might not know who he is. He is the CEO of Springfall that's been appearing on the news a lot recently, Nangong Quan. He's an old enemy of the Mo family. No wonder. Su Yuran understood. In that case, the next time I see you, it's best if I don't greet you. I don't want to make things awkward. No need. We are the ones who have a grudge against him, not you. Tongming smiled. That man doesn't look easy to get along with. This was Su Yuran's first impression of Nangong Quan. To be exact, he was a reserved man that wasn't easy to get along with. Who cared? It had nothing to do with her anyway. Of course, Su Yuran wasn't the only one feeling awkward. That night, after returning home, Nangong Quan carried Little Eggshell on his lap and asked, Tell Daddy, do you really like those two boys? Daddy, Little Eggshell mumbled. Eggshell, Daddy doesn't want to interfere with your decision to make friends, but you can't have too much contact with boys, understand? Learn to protect yourself. Uh-huh, Little Eggshell nodded. If not for the incident that happened more than 20 years ago, perhaps one of the two Mo brothers could have been chosen as his son-in-law. But now, Daddy, didn't you say you wanted to find a mother for Eggshell? Why hasn't Eggshell seen Mommy yet? What kind of mother does Eggshell like? What type? Do you want someone pretty or someone who can play with eggshells? Nangong Quan asked Little Eggshell carefully. He had decided to remarry because he wanted to give Little Eggshell a complete family. So, he didn't expect that he would like Little Eggshell. As long as Little Eggshell was satisfied, he was happy. Just like that big sister. When she smiles, it's so warm. Which big sister? That's it. Nangong Quan finally realized what was going on. Little Eggshell must have taken a liking to the two brothers' upbringing, the one with good fighting skills and a bright and clean appearance. Can it be someone else? Eggshell just feels that the big sister is very amiable. I like her very much. Since Little Eggshell liked it, what else could he do? That night, Nangong Quan ordered his men to investigate Su Yuren's family background. It seemed he was going to steal her from the Mo family. Su Yuren was lying at home all by herself. She had no idea that someone had secretly taken a liking to her. Tongning decided to have a chat with Qiu Jin, so Mo Ting made the necessary arrangements. However, Qiu Jin had one condition. He could see Tongning, but Mo Ting couldn't appear. Otherwise, there was no point in talking. "President, be careful," Lu Che reminded. "It's too dangerous for the madam to go alone." Qiu Jin simply said that I can't appear. He didn't say that Tongning can't bring anyone with her, and Mo Ting played with words. "When the time comes, you just need to bring a few people with you to protect her." "Where is Qiu Jin meeting?" "The cemetery." His wife and son's death anniversary was coming up soon, so Qiu Jin only agreed to meet at the cemetery. Otherwise, they would have no choice but to fight endlessly. Tongning temporarily compromised. After all, she was now the mother of 3 children, and compared to Mo Ting, she didn't need as much face. So, it was best for her to show up. However, Nangong Quan also heard about this matter. The Mo family wants to negotiate with Uncle Qiu in private because they want to resolve their grudge. But they don't understand Uncle Qiu at all. Uncle Qiu is stubborn. Do you think Mo Ting temporarily compromised because he listened to someone? Nangong Quan asked as he looked at his assistant. The two of them are simply using peaceful means before resorting to force. In that case, let's just focus on watching the show, Nangong Quan's assistant replied. Have you done what I asked you to do? Nangong Quan asked as he lifted his head. Have you sent the Su family an invitation? President, will the other party be wary of you because of your identity? What identity? Nangong Quan asked. Damn it, I said the wrong thing. You've seen the information. Su Yuren is nothing but a sacrifice in the Su family. Did you think they'd reject me? Nangong Quan's assistant scratched his head and let out an awkward laugh. You need to handle this matter well. Otherwise, you might as well leave. Su Yuren was sent to join the army because her mother didn't want her daughter to be bullied all year round. Her mother was disabled, so she was naturally ostracized by her family. But she refused to get a divorce and continued to waste her time with Su Yuren's father. But her father wasn't willing to stay by a disabled woman's side. So he found someone to take care of her and continued to live outside. With such a tough life, how could Su Yuren still be able to smile so brightly? Who gave her warmth? Nangong Quan probably had no resistance to warm people. So, apart from following Little Eggshell's instructions, he also began to research Su Yuren. He sent the invitation to the Su family without letting Su Yuren know. He wanted the Su family to know of his existence so he could subdue Su Yuren. That way, it would be much easier. Previously, to satisfy Little Eggshell, he even prepared all sorts of female celebrities. But, from the looks of it, Little Eggshell only liked simple and sunny things. So, he rejected all the invitations from the industry and personally took Little Eggshell to and from school. That way, he could spend more time with Su Yuren. Daddy, aren't you busy with work? Eggshell wants mommy, right? Daddy's always busy with work. How can mommy come? Nangong Quan said as he held onto his daughter's hand. Little Eggshell laughed as she understood Nangong Quan's intention. You can do it, Daddy. Good job. At that moment, Su Yuren walked in front of the father and daughter with the 2 Mo brothers. Chapter 1133. To create an opportunity for her father, Little Eggshell threw away Nangong Quan's hand and walked over to Su Yuren. Big sis, let me take them to their classroom. I know where it is. Since they were already at the school gates, Su Yuren handed the 2 little devils to Little Eggshell. Thank you in advance. You're welcome. After speaking, Little Eggshell turned around and glanced at her father, gesturing for him to seize the opportunity. But Nangong Quan had no intention of making a move yet. Su Yuren turned around and saw Nangong Quan standing behind her. She did not say a word as she headed straight for her car. Of course, Nangong Quan had no reason to chase after her. Little Eggshell watched from afar as Nangong Quan let Su Yuren leave like that. She despised her father. He didn't even take the initiative as much as she did. But she didn't know that adults were always defenseless towards children. Apart from taking the MO twins to and from school, Su Yuran spent the rest of her time studying. After being in the military for so long, she had already lost touch with the outside world. She really wanted to break away from her family, so she worked hard to create value for herself. She understood that her mother didn't want to be a burden to her, so she didn't want to divorce her father. But she didn't think she needed her mother to make such a sacrifice. With this thought, Su Yuran worked even harder. Of course, this was all thanks to Tongning's salary, which allowed her to pursue her dreams and career. At that moment, Su Yuran was in the middle of class. Meanwhile, Nangong Quan stood outside the school and watched her for half an hour. Su Yuran didn't just attend one class. She also spent the entire day studying. Her most relaxing time of the day was when she took the MO twins to and from school. Afterwards, she returned to the home that she ran away from and watched as her parents sat together. "I heard you're tutoring the child of the superstar, Tongning?" Father Su asked Su Yuran during dinner. "Uh-huh." Su Yuran nodded her head. "If that's the case, your income must be quite good. You've seen your mother's current situation. From now on, you should contribute a little to help the family," Father Su said. "If I remember correctly, you have 3 companies under your name, right?" Su Yuran asked. "What do you mean?" Papa Su's expression suddenly changed. "I joined the army when I was very young, so it was the country that raised me, not my father. As for my mother, I can pay the full amount, but only if my mother is willing to divorce you." Su Yuran asked straightforwardly. "Yuran, the evidence of this man's philandering is everywhere. When the court decides, it should be enough to split half of his wealth. Pretend I didn't say anything tonight." Father Su knew Su Yuran wasn't joking, so he tried his best to calm the mother and daughter down. However, as he stood up, he did not forget to curse Mother Su. "You should have died earlier." As Mother Su burst into tears, Su Yuran asked, "Why won't you get a divorce?" "This is my problem. It has nothing to do with you." Auntie Su replied, "Even if I die, I will drag him down with me for the rest of his life. If he's going to suffer, we'll suffer together. But don't drag me down." Su Yuran replied, "If you don't leave, I'll suffer with you. If I leave on my own, I won't be able to let go." Mother Su suddenly remembered Nangong Quan's visiting card. She didn't tell Su Yuran's father about it, otherwise he might actually sell his daughter. She simply thought, if a woman married Nangong Quan, she would have someone to rely on and wouldn't have to worry about being bullied anymore. So, Mother Su arranged to meet Nangong Quan in private without Su Yuran and Nangong Quan knowing. Meanwhile, Tongning's meeting with Qiu Jin was officially confirmed. Qiu Jin made it clear that he didn't want to see anyone from the MO family, so Tongning was the only one to meet him. Mo Ting naturally made the necessary arrangements. But what did Qiu Jin plan on doing? This was, of course, the best opportunity to kidnap Tongning. After all, he had been at the cemetery for over 20 years, so he knew every single exit. Since Tongning had delivered herself to him, there was no need for him to hold back. "Uncle Qiu, when the time comes, we will have our men stationed at all the exits. It'll be easy to kidnap Tongning," one of Qiu Jin's subordinates said as he pointed to a map of the cemetery. "As long as we secure the exits, no one will be able to get in. Let's go with this plan," Qiu Jin replied. "The couple is extremely cunning. You need to be extra careful. Even if we can't kidnap the 2 rascals, it's not a bad idea to kidnap Mo Ting's sweetheart. I didn't manage to kidnap the 2 little bastards from the Mo family, but it's not bad to kidnap Mo Ting's sweetheart. If we succeed this time, I will be able to comfort the souls of my wife and son." But how could it be so easy to make a move on Tongning? Even though the entire cemetery was filled with people, and even though every exit was sealed, as long as President Mo wanted to enter, no one would be able to stop him, even if he had to fly into the sky or dive into the ground. Soon, Bai Junyi's sci-fi film, Parasite, officially began filming. At the same time, Tongning's The Ant Queen 2 was also in the midst of preparations. This was a blessing for film fans. Because of Tongning's persistence, sci-fi films were indeed progressing in the right direction. As a result, Tong Ning's status in the hearts of film fans naturally rose to another level. Another piece of good news was that, after Lin Qian finished her confinement, she announced that she would be returning to Superstar Media and relaunching it. In other words, she would be replacing Tong Ning in poaching outdated artists. At this time, Long Jia had already returned home to rest. Because Tong Ning did not need an assistant, Lu Che could handle her daily needs. During this time, Fang Yu would become Mo Ting's assistant, and Lu Che will be able to give Tong Ning more time. At the moment, the entertainment industry was still thriving. Every day, there were new debuts and old faces falling. Every day, there were endless scandals and fights between artists. But it seemed Tong Ning had already broken away from all of this. Because, in the eyes of the public, she was no longer just an artist, a producer, or an actress. She represented good films and represented the rise of sci-fi. All of this made her status in the industry even more significant. And Mo Ting was the one that created greatness. But the public had no way of knowing about Tong Ning's secret, especially now that she even had to deal with her enemies. Chapter 1134. The morning that Tong Ning and Xiao Jin agreed to meet, Mother Su met with Nangong Quan. At first glance, Mother Su simply thought that he was like a giant and that protecting Su Yuran would be a piece of cake. At second glance, this man was very steady. These were Mother Su's first two impressions of Nangong Quan. Hello, Annie. To be honest, I'm quite surprised that you're not familiar with Yuran, yet you're so bold as to suggest starting a family with her. Mother Su asked, "Tell me honestly, do you have an unmentionable illness?" "Auntie, don't worry, I'm healthy," Nangong Quan replied. "I want to marry Su Yuran because my daughter really likes her. I'm sorry, but I already have a 5-year-old daughter. Apart from that, I don't have any other female companions. If Yuran marries me, I will try my best to be loyal to her. As for my background, I'm sure you're aware of it. If Yuran marries into the Nangong family, I won't let her suffer." Mother Su was well aware of this fact. "Have you been in prison before?" "I did to save someone. If I could go back in time, even if I knew I would end up in prison, I would still do it," Nangong Quan replied sincerely. "I know you well, but you probably don't understand how tough my daughter's life is. Just 2 days ago, her father cursed me to die right in front of her," Mother Su sneered. Mother Su sneered. "I know Yuran wants you to leave the Su family. She thinks she can take care of me and give me a good life. However, she has never imagined how difficult and gloomy an unmarried girl's life will be with a disabled mother. While other women can date prettily, she can only come home and take care of my basic needs. While other women are in relationships, she has to work multiple jobs to pay for my medical bills and our living expenses. She's taking life too lightly. I don't want her to live such a tough life. Mr. Nangong, I'm not afraid that you'll laugh at me, but I want to find a man that's trustworthy enough to save my daughter from her original family. That way, I won't have to worry about anything anymore. I can agree to let the two of you be together, but she must like you. Otherwise, she'll just be another me. This is the direction you need to work towards. I'll ask her to move out of the Su family so that it'll be more convenient for you. Of course, I'll be watching you at all times. If you don't treat my daughter well, then I'll pretend we never met today." "I will," Nangong Quan nodded. "Don't worry." Nangong Quan could feel how bitter his mother was. But it was also because of this bitterness that the greatness of maternal love was highlighted. So, as soon as Mother Su returned home, she gave Su Yuran a phone call. "Let's go home and pack your things. You can move out and live on your own." "No, Mom, what happened?" "You don't have to worry about me. Your aunt will come over to take care of me. So, I'm going to clean up your room for your aunt to live in. You know how powerful your aunt is. You should go find a place to live." Although moving out was Su Yuran's dream, she wanted to take her mother with her. But she had now been kicked out by her own mother. If it was someone else, Su Yuran would be worried. But her auntie wasn't easy to deal with. She was a lawyer and specialized in divorce cases. This was the reason why her father didn't dare to act recklessly. If her father dared to be rude to her mother again, he wouldn't be able to handle her auntie. This was indeed much more useful than staying at home. After all, her auntie was all alone. If she moved in, she would be able to take care of her. Because of this, she decided to move out. It was a warm afternoon. Tongning headed straight for the cemetery Chiu Jin mentioned with a few bodyguards to negotiate with him. Although, as soon as she stepped into the cemetery, she smelled danger. But she trusted her husband. The entrances and exits of the cemetery were all under Chiu Jin's control. This was obvious from the small number of people passing by. But Tongning didn't care as she headed straight for Chiu Jin. The bodyguards followed not too far behind. At that moment, Chiu Jin was sweeping his wife's grave. As soon as he saw Tongning, he stood up and smiled. "I never thought you would actually come. I'm here to solve a problem," Tongning said as she removed her sunglasses. She then turned to Chiu Jin's wife's grave and bowed 3 times. "Solve a problem? Did you know? Without the Mo family, my son can already have a family and a career," Chiu Jin said as he stared into Tongning's eyes. "Then, let me tell you a story. There was a famous female celebrity that had a crazy father and a 13-year-old illegitimate son. Because of her death, her father was beaten to death and her son was sent to an orphanage. 15 years later, he was sent to prison for theft and has yet to be released. I'm sure you're more familiar with that female celebrity than anyone else. In that case, who's going to avenge her? Aren't her father and her son human? Your wife and son are simply avenging you. After all, this world doesn't allow any darkness to exist. Without the Mo family, how far did you think you could go? Without the Mo family, how long did you think you could live? Chiu Jin, you don't need to be so upset. If you had walked the right path and done your job properly, your wife and son wouldn't have been implicated because of the Nangong family's investigation. Isn't it obvious who implicated them? It's bad enough that you implicated your wife and son, but now you're implicating someone else's wife and son? Shut up, Chiu Jin roared. Who gave you the guts to slander me like this? Chiu Jin, tell me your conditions. What do I have to do for you to stop? Stop? Have you ever thought about leaving after coming here today? Chiu Jin sneered. I don't care who implicated my wife. All I know is the Mo family are the culprit. I'm going to make the Mo family pay. Otherwise, all the years I've endured would have been for nothing. Tongning smiled calmly as she pulled out a yellow diary from her handbag. I found this in the old house you guys used to live in. I heard it was hidden in a crack in the wall. The house hasn't been maintained for many years, so it wasn't easy for me to get my hands on it. Don't you want to know what your wife's diary says? Did you think I'd fall for your tricks? You Mo family people love to argue. Chiu Jin yelled as he pointed to Tongning's nose. Chapter 1135. September 11th, you. That day, Qinghong came looking for me and told me that Chiu Jin was working for Mr. Nangong. I suddenly felt scared because I was about to marry this man, yet I didn't even know what his real occupation was. To protect him, I even scolded Qinghong away. But that night, Qinghong died. I asked Chiu Jin what happened to Qinghong, and he told me it was an accident. In the dark, I trembled in fear because I wanted to call the police. I was really scared. Tongning ignored Chiu Jin's insults. Instead, she opened up her diary and read out one of the contents. October 13th, little you. Today, I had another honest talk with Chiu Jin, but I realized he has no respect for life at all. I'm really disappointed. I really want to leave, but the doctor told me I'm pregnant. I suddenly don't know what to do. I think my parents are in heaven. They must hate me to death for being with a scumbag like him. I also hate myself. On the 6th of November, I made up my mind to leave because Chiu Jin was a complete demon. Why didn't he feel any remorse for what he had done? I couldn't forgive him anymore. I hate trash, especially trash that cheated on my feelings. Shut up, Chiu Jin yelled as soon as he heard Tongning read out these words. What do you know? Tongning did not continue. She simply closed the diary and smiled. Revenge for the woman you love and your unborn son? If I was your dead girlfriend and found out you used such a method to get revenge, I would hate you even more. Shut your mouth. Chiu Jin took a few steps forward angrily. So, he immediately yelled, and all of his subordinates that were lying in ambush around the graveyard immediately stepped out. Tongning's bodyguards sensed the danger, so they quickly surrounded Tongning. Even though Chiu-jin had around 20 people on his side, Tongning's side was obviously outnumbered. Today, I want the Mo family to die with my wife and son. The person that should die the most is you. If you had walked the right path, your girlfriend wouldn't have died because of someone else's revenge. You are the one that caused her death. Nonsense, Chiu-jin retorted. Tongning did not continue to provoke him. Instead, she flipped to the last page of the diary. There were only 2 sentences written on it. May God help me leave this devil's side. Otherwise, I'd rather die. I hate thugs. Kill her for me. Chiu-jin's eyes were bloodshot, as if he had been completely enraged by Tongning. He actually dared to threaten to kill her in front of everyone. More than 20 people rushed over. It was indeed a spectacular sight, making one feel fearful. But Tongning remained calm as she stood in the same spot and asked, "Did you really think you could touch me? You killed your wife and child, yet you keep saying that you want to frame someone else. You're not even a man. Why should I be afraid of you? What are you waiting for? Aren't you going to do it?" The group of over 20 people moved closer to Tongning and the others and surrounded them. "Sorry, superstar. Who told you to be Mo Ting's woman? Beat her to death." Chiu-jin's voice trembled as it echoed throughout the cemetery. However, at this time, 100 men dressed in black suits entered the cemetery in an orderly manner. Chiu-jin's men had no choice but to retreat. After all, who had ever seen a formation like this? Afterwards, Mo Ting stepped out from the crowd and approached Tongning. He then pulled her into his embrace. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Tongning shook her head. "This jerk is too stubborn. He refuses to admit his mistakes," Tongning said as she pointed to Chiu-jin with her chin. Tongning pointed her chin at Chiu-jin and said, "You're a complete scumbag. You caused the death of your own wife and child, yet you're trying to push the blame onto someone else. Can't you handle it?" Mo Ting lifted his head and looked at Chiu-jin as he asked in a deep voice, "Who did you say you were going to beat to death? What's there to brag about when you're bullying someone with numbers?" "When dealing with trash, I don't mind being ruthless," Mo Ting replied. "Plus, I don't need to be polite with you. Chiu-jin, even if you go back and train for another 100 years, you still won't be able to do anything to me. Since you insist on using the rules of the underworld, then let me teach you a lesson about the underworld style. If you want to make a move, fine. But I can guarantee that you won't be able to hurt a single hair on my body. In fact, you will pay with the lives of everyone here. Mo Ting, if you're so capable, fight me one-on-one. I don't need to dirty my hands because of you," Mo Ting replied. Afterwards, Tongning threw the diary at Chiu-jin. "Since you don't believe me, you can slowly read through it and find out who killed your wife." Chiu-jin did not believe Tongning's words at all. He simply thought she was lying. But as soon as he picked up the diary and saw the familiar handwriting, he felt like he had been struck by lightning. It turned out his fiancée really didn't like to hang out with gangsters. Back then, he thought she would be pleasantly surprised and think it was cool and hot-blooded. But who would have thought his fiancée had been plotting to leave him all this time? No, this couldn't be possible. Tongning must have made this up. There was no way he would believe her. So, he tore the diary apart. But, to his surprise, a photo of the couple fell out of the diary. Along with the photo was a medical report. His fiancée's name was clearly written on it, and the content stated that she had agreed to an abortion. Could it be that before she died, she had already secretly taken the child? Did she hate him that much? After reading through the yellowed report, Chiu-jin knelt to the ground. His mind was a mess. He didn't know how to accept everything that had just happened. "Uncle Chiu, should we attack?" "Give me an answer." "Uncle Chiu." Mo Ting took the opportunity and gestured for a group of tall men to step forward. A moment later, the 20-odd men were all pressed against the ground, leaving only Chiu-jin kneeling in front of his fiancée's grave. Tongning lifted her head and looked at Mo Ting. However, Mo Ting shook his head. No one knew what Chiu-jin was planning. What if he had gone crazy? In reality, Mo Ting was right. Chiu-jin had indeed gone crazy. But he didn't do anything to anyone. He simply stabbed himself in the back of his hand with a knife. What have I been doing all these years? I'm such a fool. I actually thought you would be with me wholeheartedly. It turns out you aborted the child a long time ago. Chapter 11:36. And I was still delusional. I thought that if I followed Mr. Nangong, I would have a bright future, I would be able to give you the best life, and you would definitely look up to me. So, it turns out that you're looking down on me. What right do you have to look down on me? What right do you have? How could you do this to me? Do you know how torturous it was for me to carry this hatred for so many years? But in the end, he was stabbed by you. How much did you hate me that you aborted the child? Tell me. She would rather die than be with you. How much do you think she hates you? You men think it's glorious, righteous, and impressive, but to a woman, you're just a thug. From her perspective, if she were to tell others about it, it would be embarrassing. That's why she was so ruthless. Your hands are stained with blood, and you still want to have happiness? That's impossible. There's karma in this world. That's why you've been played by yourself for so many years. Tongning's last sentence struck Qiu Jin's heart and destroyed his last line of defense. After all, Qiu Jin never regretted joining the Nangong family. In fact, it was the thing that he was most proud of. But the thing that he was most proud of was the thing that hurt and shameful his fiancée the most. She even went as far as aborting their child. This shook Qiu Jin's firm belief. It seemed for the rest of his life, he would have to struggle with this matter. What are people most afraid of? It wasn't a physical or psychological injury, but the belief that he had held onto for a long time had suddenly collapsed. It was actually wrong. Seeing Qiu Jin's crazy state, Qiu Jin's subordinates quickly walked out of the cemetery. From the looks of it, this man wasn't going to amount to much from now on. Meanwhile, the people that Mo Ting brought with him all retreated. Don't worry, the media won't hear a thing about what happened today. Mo Ting comforted. Let's go. Tongning turned to look at Qiu Jin and nodded her head. He's a stubborn person. Unfortunately, his stubbornness isn't in the right place. President, Uncle Qiu, isn't doing too well. As soon as the person that Nangong Quan had sent to gather information returned to Spring Fall, he reported the situation to Nangong Quan. He's been sitting in the cemetery on his own for 3 hours. No matter how we call for him, he won't respond. After hearing this, Nangong Quan turned around from the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at his subordinate. Did Tongning win? I don't know what Tongning did, but Uncle Qiu was already kneeling on the floor, crying without even lifting a finger. Kill and destroy the heart. If a person had faith, if you didn't kill them, they would forever haunt you. But destroying one's heart was different. Once a person's heart was dead, they would no longer be a threat to anyone. This was where Tongning excelled. President Mo brought over 100 people with him to support Tongning. But not long after, they all left. As for the media, not a single word was leaked and the matter was resolved cleanly. Bring Uncle Qiu back and take good care of him. Nangong Quan instructed his subordinates without saying anything else. Since the couple had already dealt with Uncle Qiu, he didn't have to show up again and hurt his relationship with Uncle Qiu. So, he could now spend more time dealing with the matter between him and Su Yuran. Hatred could be used to help him grow, but it shouldn't be used as a weapon. After returning home, Tongning was exhausted as she leaned against Mo Ting's chest. Do you know how worried I was after you went into the cemetery on your own? Mo Ting asked. I really regret putting you in danger. You didn't need to do that. Aren't I fine? I simply wanted to have a good sleep. Tongning yawned as she snuggled into Mo Ting's embrace. She then closed her eyes and fell asleep. Mo Ting sat on the sofa, without moving as he allowed Tongning to fall asleep. Even though his limbs were stiff, he did not wake his wife up. It had been a long time since he hugged Tongning like this. Soon, Su Yuran returned with the child, and Tongning woke up in a daze. Seeing Mo Ting not moving, she could tell that his body was stiff. But he never said a word about it. So, Tongning helped him rub his body. From now on, I won't dare to sleep on you. You'll wake up as soon as the child comes back. Mo Ting laughed. I can't do anything about you, Tongning complained. Afterwards, she noticed Su Yuran was carrying some luggage on her back, so she asked curiously, Where are you going with all these things? My mother kicked me out. Su Yuran smiled awkwardly. But Don't worry, I've already found a place to stay. It's not far from here, and I won't delay the kids from school. That's not what I meant. I just wanted to ask if there's anything you need my help with. Tongning smiled gently. For now on, you don't need to be so careful when you take Zishi and Zichin out. The matter with the Nangong family has been resolved. I'm doing well at the moment. Thank you, Miss Tang. On the surface, Su Yuran appeared to be an open-minded person. She would never ask for help from others. This was the attitude that she developed during her time in the military. Before she tried her best, she would never ask for help. Afterwards, she moved into the apartment that she found that day. The environment wasn't bad. Most importantly, it wasn't far from Hyatt Regency, so it would be more convenient for her to pick the kids up. That night, little Eggshell lay in bed after a bath. As she watched Nangong Quan holding a storybook, she immediately pounced on him. Big sister has already moved. Why haven't you done anything yet? Are you in a hurry? Nangong Quan looked at his daughter as he helped her back onto the bed. I want Big Sister to take me to and from school too. I'll be very happy, little Eggshell said as she pouted. Plus, Big Sister is very cool and looks very compatible with Daddy. Really? Of course. Little Eggshell nodded her head. Little Eggshell, hold on a little longer. We can't scare Big Sister, right? Nangong Quan never expected that little Eggshell would like Su Yuran so much. Fine. Now that Nangong Quan had moved and his mother-in-law had given the order, it was time for him to make his move. However, he hoped that Su Yuran wouldn't reject him too badly. He wasn't a romantic person and didn't know how to do beautiful things. But he could appear when Su Yuran needed him the most. But did she understand? To understand and get close to a person, you had to rely on your heart. But Lu Che accidentally found out that Nangong Quan knew about the Su family. He found it interesting, so he told Mo Ting and Tongning about it. Mo Ting did not react, but Tongning was a little surprised. Is Nangong Quan trying to steal Su Yuran from me? I'm not going to let him have his way. Chapter 1137. Soon, 3 months passed, and Miss Chow returned from her studies. Tongning immediately sent someone to the airport to welcome her. At the same time, Tongning's new post-production team, Starshine, was completed and they were currently working together. Of course, there was still a lot of time for them to get used to it. By this time, the Ant Queen 2 was ready and Tongning had already selected the rest of the actors. All that was left was to arrange their schedules and auditions. Not long after, Hai Rui officially announced the cast of the Ant Queen 2. As usual, Tongning would be producing and Xiao Man would be directing. There would also be international martial arts superstar Old Long, new actress Fei Er, the popular young actor Luo Sheng, and, of course, the main antagonist, Mo Ting. As soon as the cast was announced, the public immediately reacted. There was a lot to look forward to. The addition of Old Long was already a pleasant surprise, but this time, Mo Ting was going to take part as well. In fact, he was going to play the main antagonist. At the same time, the poster for the Ant Queen 2 clearly stated the theme. It was time to test the teacher-student relationship. In other words, the main plot of the Ant Queen 2 was to focus on the teacher-student relationship. Fans left comments excitedly urging Tongning to start filming. I like Tongning's work because she doesn't follow the path of heroes and beauties. Instead, she gives up on romance. Instead, she explores relationships on a deeper level and makes me feel comfortable. Last time, it was a father and daughter. This time, it's a teacher-student relationship. Just thinking about it, it's a lot to watch. I wonder how this international superstar will be able to do against a big monster. Am I the only one that thinks President Mo's antagonist will be interesting? In the Ant Queen 1, his relationship was already so smooth. I can't wait to see him explode. Anticipation +1. Anticipation +2. They've only announced that they've finished filming now. When are they going to start? How torturous. Let's go look through all of President Mo and Mo Ting's works right now. We should be able to last a little longer. I think Tongning's involvement in the film and television industry has brought new life to the industry. I think the entire film industry should thank her. She simply did what she wanted to do. She wanted to fulfill Xiao Sin's wish. She wanted to stand side by side with Mo Ting at the top of the entertainment industry. Had she finally achieved it? Afterwards, someone researched Xiao Man's background and found out that she was actually Xiao Sen's daughter. On top of that, she was a famous photographer. In order to fulfill her father's last wish, she was prepared to dedicate the rest of her life to sci-fi. She originally thought that the public would have some objections towards a newcomer director like her, but surprisingly, everyone was very tolerant of her. This was because as a director that wanted to be like her father, she was willing to give it her all. As a result, news about the Ant Queen 2 was everywhere. As Nangang Quan sat in his office, he couldn't help but feel that the MO couple were indeed strong and worthy opponents. President, should we start the second round of promotions for Parasite? Nangang Quan shook his head, indicating that the timing wasn't right. There's no need. Focus on the production of Parasite. The final result is the best promotion. I understand. This is the perfect time for a sci-fi film. Although I don't want to admit it, Tongning has made a huge contribution, Nangang Quan's assistant said. Otherwise, let's not talk about now. Even 20 years from now, Beijing may not even produce a decent sci-fi film. What do you think of Bai Jun? Bai Jun is indeed talented. The production didn't find the wrong person. That's good, Nangang Quan nodded. He had high hopes for Parasite. Even if it couldn't compete with Hai Rui's The Ant Queen 2, as long as it was a good film, it wouldn't be buried. Afterwards, Nangang Quan packed his things and drove over to Qiu Jin's home. But Qiu Jin's subordinate told him, Uncle Qiu passed away 10 days ago. Why didn't anyone tell me? Nangang Quan yelled. Why didn't anyone report such a big thing? Because Uncle Qiu passed away very suddenly. He hung himself, but the night before he passed away, he told me that he wanted to go overseas. Who would have guessed? Qiu Jin's subordinate replied. I even saw Uncle Qiu's packed luggage. Then, why didn't you call the police? The police came over and confirmed that he suffocated to death. He also left a suicide note, so they didn't investigate further. But I still feel like something's not right. Why would someone that was about to go overseas suddenly choose to die? Plus, he only left a single sentence in his suicide note. Nangang Quan was also in disbelief, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what was wrong. Just like that, Qiu Jin mysteriously disappeared. Yet, not a single person told him about this. He originally thought Qiu Jin was in a bad mood and needed to recover, so he didn't ask about it. But who would have thought? Did you check Uncle Qiu's room in detail? Did you find anything suspicious? Nothing, I checked it. After speaking, the bald subordinate pulled out a phone from his drawer and handed it to Nangang Quan. This is Uncle Qiu's phone. I check his call history. On the night he tried to commit suicide, Uncle Qiu spoke to an unknown number for half an hour. What's his identity? I called him and asked. He bought car insurance. Nangang Quan received the phone without saying a word. He suddenly wondered if there was someone else behind Uncle Qiu's back. But before he had time to investigate further, he received a phone call from Su Yuran's mother. Mr. Nangang, can you please take Yuran to the registration office as soon as possible? Annie, what's wrong? Her father's business failed, and he's targeting her. Nangang Quan's heart sank, but this wasn't what he was concerned about. Your voice is very weak. I'm fine. I'm fine. This definitely didn't sound like she was fine. After hanging up the phone, Nangang Quan directly left Qiu Jin's home and drove over to Su Yuran's classroom. Afterwards, he directly dragged her out. Mr. Nangang, are you sure? Did you drag the wrong person? Your mother might be in danger. You should go home first, Nangang Quan said as he pulled out his phone and showed Su Yuran a phone number. After confirming that it was her mother's phone number, Su Yuran turned to leave. But Nangang Quan held her back. I'll take you there. It'll be faster. Although Su Yuran was full of questions, she didn't have a better option. So, she boarded Nangang Quan's car. It was strange. How did a stranger find out that her mother was in danger? Chapter 1138. How do you know my mother? We have a bit of a history, Nangang Quan replied. By the way, don't trust your auntie so much. Su Yuran didn't know what to say. She was simply worried about her mother. Nangang Quan knew that she was nervous, so he sped up the car and drove her straight back to the Su family home. To avoid suspicion, Nangong Quan did not accompany Su Yuran inside. Instead, he stood guard at the door in case Su Yuran needed his help. He never imagined that after observing this woman for so long, the first time he spoke to her was because of her mother. Su Yuran had no time to think about Nangong Quan's problem as she ran straight into her mother's room. As soon as she pushed open the door, she found her lawyer Annie kicking her mother who was lying on the floor. "What are you doing?" Su Yuran asked her auntie angrily. The woman didn't expect Su Yuran to return home at a time like this, so she looked at her in a panic. "Yuran, why are you back? If I didn't come back, I wouldn't have known that my auntie was this good." Su Yuran rushed over, picked up her mother, and placed her in a wheelchair. "Mom, are you okay?" Mother Su held onto her chest. At first, she wanted to say something, but as soon as she opened her mouth, blood flowed out. Su Yuran was so frightened that she immediately called the ambulance. But as she carried her mother out of the Su family home to wait for help, she noticed Nangong Quan's car was still parked outside. "What's wrong?" Although Su Yuran tried her best to hold back her tears, she almost burst into tears. "My mom's hurt is serious. I need to take her to the hospital." "Get in the car." "Okay." Su Yuran immediately boarded the car. At this time, her auntie also stepped out. Su Yuran glared at her auntie hatefully and simply said, "I'll deal with you when I get back." After speaking, Su Yuran boarded the car and allowed Nangong Quan to take the mother and daughter to the hospital. After an examination by the doctor, they discovered that Mother Su had been beaten up in multiple places and her ribs were almost broken, and the culprit behind all this was her auntie. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed it. "Why did you warn me to be careful of my auntie?" While Mother Su was receiving treatment, Su Yuran asked Nangong Quan, "Do you know something? When your mother called me just now, I heard some noise on the phone. It was a woman's voice insulting your mother and calling her big sister." So that was how it was. Su Yuran understood. "Thank you for today, Mr. Nangong. I'll treat you to a meal another day. But right now, I need to figure out what's going on. I can stay. I do have some history with your mother. If you don't believe me, you can ask her when she wakes up." Nangong Quan insisted on staying at the hospital because he had to prevent Su Yuran's father from causing trouble. Su Yuran was also concerned about this, so she nodded her head, "Thank you." The couple sat in silence for an hour. But for some reason, Su Yuran suddenly felt safe with a man by her side. She had never felt so safe before. But this time, she actually felt safe, all because Nangong Quan was sitting next to her. Soon, Mother Su woke up. As soon as Su Yuran walked into the hospital room and saw her mother, she burst into tears. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? What's going on? Why did Annie treat you like that?" "Your Annie is also your father's woman," Mother Su finally said after holding back for so long. "They hooked up a long time ago. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Su Yuran asked as she hit her chest. "I always thought she was a good person. I thought, Yuran, there aren't many good people in this world. Every adult has their own interests. Your mother has already seen through this. That's why I don't care how others treat me." "But I care," Su Yuran replied. "I care a lot. From today onwards, if anyone dares to bully you again, I will kill them. It's no longer appropriate for Annie to return to the Su family home. You can stay at my place for the time being," Nangong Quan suddenly said as he stood behind the mother and daughter. "I don't have anyone at home, just my daughter." "I'm afraid that's not appropriate." "There's nothing inappropriate about it," Nangong Quan replied. "The two of you need a safe place, but we're not related to you in any way. To be honest, my daughter really likes Yuran." Nangong Quan used his daughter as a shield. Nangong Quan used his daughter as a shield. If he mentioned anything about marriage or dating, he would be taking advantage of Nangong Quan's misfortune. So, he didn't want to force Su Yuran to be with him. "If possible, I would like to hire Yuran to be my daughter's tutor. All you need to do is spend time with my daughter on the weekends. That would solve your problem." "But you know that I'm a tutor for the Mo family, right?" Su Yuran asked. "I know," Nangong Quan nodded. "Then, why did you are you and the Mo family is Mo," Nangong Quan replied straightforwardly. Nangong Quan replied straightforwardly, "Don't be shy. In your current state, you don't need to maintain your pride. It's not like I'm your enemy. In that case, thank you, Mr. Nangong. Su Yuran did not say anything, but Mother Su directly agreed. Of course, Nangong Quan was well aware that Su Yuran was currently thinking about how to deal with the Su family, especially her father and Annie, who had a human face but a human heart. As Mother Su was injured, Su Yuran called Tongning to ask for a day off. After understanding the situation, Tongning told Su Yuran to take good care of her mother. As for the Mo family's two little devils, she would send someone else to pick them up. Ting, do you think Nangong Quan is currently with Yuran? Are you actually interested in their relationship? Mo Ting asked helplessly as he looked at his wife. Don't you think it's interesting? Nangong Quan doesn't like anyone else, yet he's interested in my tutor. I'm not looking down on Yuran. I'm just saying that Nangong Quan's taste doesn't seem to fit the heavy makeup of the entertainment industry. Tongning laughed. I can't believe he's actually getting involved with a skilled woman like Yuran. It's going to be interesting to watch. Are you going to step in and stop him? I don't have the time to do that. Tongning laughed. Nangong Quan is actually a tough guy. If he ends up with Yuran, I'd be happy to see it happen. I heard that Yuran's life hasn't been easy either. If she ends up with Nangong Quan, perhaps her life will change, just like how I married you. Chapter 1139. That night, Nangong Quan instructed his assistant to prepare a room for the mother and daughter. As soon as little Eggshell heard about this, she was ecstatic. So, she clung on to Nangong Quan and asked, Is Big Sis coming to be my mother? Is she coming to live with us? After hearing little Eggshell's question, Nangong Quan placed her on his lap and explained, Eggshell, Daddy is simply helping Big Sis to protect her and her mother from being bullied by outsiders. Big Sis isn't going to be your mother. At least, not yet. So, you need to be obedient and don't talk nonsense in front of Big Sis, okay? Little Eggshell thought for a moment before she placed her hands on her hips and replied, For the sake of Daddy's happiness, I'll endure it for now. Nangong Quan didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at his daughter's mischievous expression, but it was because of this treasure that he couldn't bear to part with her. At least, if he had to choose between revenge and his daughter, he would choose his daughter without hesitation. Afterwards, Nangong Quan coaxed little Eggshell to sleep. But as he returned to his room to shower and get some rest, his mind kept replaying everything that happened that day at the Su family home. Su Yuran's experience, Su Yuran's reaction, and Su Yuran's emotions. It was all in his mind, and he couldn't get it out of his head. In fact, he even imagined that Su Yuran wasn't having a good time at the hospital. Yuran, are you still angry? Mother Su asked after noticing that her daughter hadn't said a word all night. Am I? Mom, how could you endure it? Su Yuran asked as she lifted her head and sobbed. How could you endure such a huge injustice? It's been so many years since your mother was crippled. What haven't you seen? So, there's nothing to be angry about. After all, there's nothing I can do, Mother Su said in self-mockery. Mother Su said in self-mockery, I just want to protect you. I just want you to be safe. Nothing else matters. Mom, I will definitely get revenge for you. Mother Su smiled, but she did not respond to Su Yuran. After all, everything she did was because she wanted Su Yuran to have a good life. From the looks of it, Nangong Quan was the perfect candidate for her son-in-law. So, she could only hope that the two of them would end up together. The next morning, Su Yuran was woken up by the sound of her phone ringing. Seeing that it was her Annie calling, Su Yuran immediately stepped out of her hospital room and walked into the hallway to pick up the call. Yuran, your father wants you to come home. I'll be right back, Su Yuran replied before she put down her phone and returned to the hospital room. Who called? Auntie Su asked. Mom, I'm going to go to work first. I need to pick up Tongning's 2 babies. After that, I'll come back and take care of you, Su Yuran explained casually. Go ahead. Mama Su waved her hand. If I have a problem, I'll find a nurse. After leaving the hospital, Su Yuran hailed a taxi and returned to the Su family home. However, Nangong Quan had already arrived at the hospital. As soon as he saw Su Yuran rushing out, he immediately chased after her. After entering the Su family home, Su Yuran spotted her and her mother's suitcases in the middle of the living room. Father Su and her auntie were sitting on the sofa in the living room, sipping on their morning tea as if nothing had happened. "Since you're back, you should take your and your mother's things with you," Father Su said. "The divorce papers are also on the dining table. Take them with you." "Yuran, stop hesitating. Before your father regrets his decision, you should leave," Su Yuran's auntie said anxiously. "This is your last chance? I don't quite understand what you're saying, auntie. Your father has recently run into some problems with his business and is currently waiting for a cash flow. But your father's business partner said that if you're willing to marry him, he's willing to invest money to help your father overcome his difficulties. But he's an old man in his 50s. How could I watch you jump into a pit of fire? So I begged your father. It wasn't easy for him to agree to let you go. In other words, Annie had already done everything she could for Su Yuran, so she should take her and your mother's things and leave." "Annie, are you trying to say that my father almost sold me off?" "Yuran, you can't say that. The Su family has treated you well." "Shut up," Su Yuran said to her auntie. Su Yuran said to her auntie in a low voice, "You might be shameless, but I'm not. Annie must be trying to make a name for herself by stealing her brother-in-law and kicking her first wife out of the house. Did you think that anyone would believe you? Auntie, don't you know who I'm working for?" Su Yuran laughed. "Don't you know that I'm tutoring Tongning's 2 children?" Su Yuran's auntie froze as she looked at Father Su. "You wouldn't dare?" "I wouldn't dare." Su Yuran's eyes turned red as she ran over to her auntie and grabbed her by her clothes as she dragged her up the stairs. "I'm going to throw you down from the 2nd floor right now and cripple your legs. I want to see if the person downstairs will still like you." "Su Yuran, how dare you?" Father Su yelled from downstairs. "Yuran, don't do anything reckless." Su Yuran's auntie was no match for the skilled Su Yuran. "Su Yuran, do you want to go to jail? If you go to jail, I'm going to torture your mother." These words successfully angered Su Yuran and struck fear in her heart. She wasn't afraid of anything, but she was afraid that if something happened to her, no one would take care of her mother. "Let go! Let go!" Perhaps because Su Yuran had been inside for too long, Nangong Quan was worried that something might have happened to her. So, he didn't care if people would gossip about him as he directly entered the Su family home. But the front door wasn't closed. So, the first thing that Nangong Quan saw was Su Yuran grabbing onto a woman and standing on the 2nd floor steps while her father roared in anger. "Yuran, let go. It's not worth it." As soon as Su Yuran heard these sudden words, she turned to look at Nangong Quan in surprise. "Listen to me. I can help you get what you want. But it's not worth it if I don't sacrifice myself." Su Yuran grabbed onto her auntie's shirt, but in the end, she released her grip and pushed her to the side. Afterwards, she walked down the steps and approached Nangong Quan. "Why are you here?" "I'm here to take you away from here," Nangong Quan replied as he placed his arm around her shoulder. "Since you're leaving the Su family, it's time to cut all ties." "Who are you?" Father Su finally reacted and asked about Nangong Quan's identity. Chapter 1140. Nangong Quan did not say a word as he handed Father Su his business card and retreated to Su Yuran's side. "From the looks of it, your luggage has already been packed. In that case, we don't need to waste any more effort." "Thank you, Mr. Su," Nangong Quan said politely. As soon as Father Su saw Nangong Quan's business card, he realized that this was the CEO of Springfall Film and Television that was mentioned in the news recently. In fact, he also ran a technology company in the U.S. "May I ask Mr. Nangong and my daughter, Yuran is my fiancée? I've never had the chance to visit her, but I never thought I'd encounter a situation like this." Nangong Quan laughed before he wrapped his arm around Su Yuran's waist and turned around. "Let's go. Mr. Nangong, please wait. By the way, Mr. Su, I think it's time for you to receive a lawyer's letter. Also, Ms. Su, you cheated on your wife and abused your disabled wife. Someone needs to step in. I know that Yuran's auntie is a famous lawyer, but no matter how famous you are, you can't go up against my entire team of lawyers. From now on, Yuran has nothing to do with the Su family. Mr. Su, if I find out that you've contacted Yuran or Auntie Su in private again, I'm sorry. I will make you suffer. Originally, when I found out that the Su family was in a bit of trouble, I wanted to offer my help. But from the looks of it, it's better to give the money to Yuran as pocket money. What do you say, Yuran? Su Yuran was currently in Nangong Quan's arms. Although she didn't know why Nangong Quan wanted to help her, she was grateful that he had stepped forward. At this time, Father Su suddenly changed his attitude towards Su Yuran and softened. Yuran, can you lend me that money? Even if it's a loan, I will definitely return it to you. However, Su Yuran simply smiled. If I really had that much money, I would use it to fight my mother's lawsuit. I would at least take half of your assets, even though I don't really care. As soon as Father Su heard this, his face turned pale. Yuran, don't treat Dad like this. Yuran, you want me to help you? Sure, you know what I want. Su Yuran said as she looked at her auntie. Of course, Su Qingsan's father understood what she meant. He immediately raised his hand and swore, I will make her get out of my sight right now and never appear in the Su family again. That's enough. What she owes my mother is far more than just getting lost. Qizhong, how could you do this to me? Su Yuran's auntie looked at Father Su in shock. Are you going to sacrifice me for the sake of money? Nothing is more important than the company now. When I have nothing, I don't believe that you will still be willing to follow me. Father Su snorted. I truly love you. For you, I even divorced. Where do you want me to go now? I don't care where you go, as long as I can help Yuran vent her anger. Father Su suddenly acted strangely righteous. Leave now. Leave. Father Su didn't just say it verbally. He even used his hands to push Su Yuran's auntie away. Didn't the tables turn a little too suddenly? Su Yuran's auntie never imagined that after so many years of hard work, just as she was about to succeed, Su Yuran's fiancé would suddenly appear out of nowhere and ruin her plans. Qizhong, don't chase me away, okay? As she watched the two put on an act, Su Yuran simply felt one thing. How disgusting. Let's go then. Nangong Quan wasn't interested in watching the two women push each other, so he directly helped Su Yuran carry her luggage. No, Yuran, don't go yet. Mr. Nangong, look. You want me to help you? Sure, it depends on how you treat my mother. After saying this, Su Yuran turned around and followed Nangong Quan out of the Su family home without looking back. Regardless of everything, Nangong Quan had helped her today. Ever since she was born, she had never been able to hold her head up high in front of Father Su. Have you vented the anger in your heart? Hearing Nangong Quan's question, Su Yuran shook her head. Even if these two men were hacked to pieces, it wouldn't be enough to vent my mother's anger. If I told you that I could continue to help you vent your anger, would you make what I just said become true? Nangong Quan asked. For some reason, even though he had told himself to stay calm, he suddenly felt like he was being too rude. Seeing that Su Yuran didn't know what to say, Nangong Quan immediately said, Sorry, I scared you. No, I wanted to ask, what did you say? About my fiancé? Nangong Quan replied. Don't misunderstand. I didn't make this decision on a whim. I've been thinking about it for a few months now. I know you're not familiar with me, but seeing Nangong Quan's nervousness, Su Yuran suddenly laughed. Huh. Is it funny? Nangong Quan was a little upset. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have asked. Mr. Nangong, I can tell that you're a good person and I'm grateful that you helped me today. But you're taking advantage of me. Am I? But I'm serious, Nangong Quan emphasized. I don't mind being friends with you, but isn't it a little strange for us to be engaged so quickly? It's the first time they've met, yet they've already registered their marriage. After hearing this, Su Yuran finally realized how serious Nangong Quan was. So, she put away her smile and looked into his eyes in seriousness. In reality, deep down, she had the urge to drag Nangong Quan into a marriage. But logic told her that it wasn't possible. She knew that she was still immersed in Nangong Quan's charm. But she didn't want to miss out on a man like him. So, she smiled. Let's pretend we went on a blind date today. Let's start from a blind date and get to know each other better. What do you think? After hearing this, Nangong Quan let out a sigh of relief. As long as you agree. To have such a rich man by her side and help her over and over again, as a woman, It was no wonder that she was tempted. After all, every woman loved a fairy tale. But Su Yuran was well aware of her own situation. Nangong Quan was rich and powerful. He could find any woman he wanted. So, she needed to find out if Nangong Quan was acting on a whim or if he was serious about their relationship. After all, everything happened too suddenly. Little did she know, Nangong Quan had been secretly watching her for a few months now. Chapter 1141. After the couple came to an agreement, they decided to first pick Mother Su up from the hospital. But Su Yuran was worried that Mother Su would overthink things, so before they arrived at the hospital, she asked for Nangong Quan's opinion. Can we not tell anyone about our relationship for now? Nangong Quan turned to look at Su Yuran and nodded his head. Although he was a little disappointed, he still respected Su Yuran. I understand. Thank you. Su Yuran did not say it out loud, but Nangong Quan understood the meaning behind her words. It would be troublesome to break up in the future. So, in front of Mother Su, the two women were extremely polite. It was as if Su Yuran didn't care about what they had discussed earlier in the car. To make things easier for Mother Su, her room was downstairs, and Su Yuran's room was upstairs, opposite Nangong Quan's and next to Little Eggshell's. If Little Eggshell sees you when she comes home from school, she'll be so happy. But I don't think it's a good idea to do this. Su Yuran was worried about what others thought of her. There's only me and Little Eggshell here. We're the only two people in the Nangong family. Who would say anything? You and Annie can stay here. I can temporarily sleep in the company's apartment. I'll leave Little Eggshell to you. As Nangong Quan spoke, he grabbed a few sets of clothes from his room and prepared to take them to the office. Don't worry. Su Yuran nodded her head. She was actually grateful for Nangong Quan's thoughtfulness. He had helped her avoid the awkwardness of seeing Nangong Quan. Moreover, she couldn't stay here for long. She had to find a place as soon as possible and settle down with Mother Su. Between the two of them, they were still so polite. However, it was precisely this kind of ambiguous feeling that made people even more addicted. That night, Little Eggshell returned home full of anticipation. Sure enough, she saw the big sister she wanted. Wow, Daddy didn't lie to me. Big sister can really keep me company. Little Eggshell, don't be rude. Greet them first, Nangong Quan said. Little Eggshell put down her backpack and politely walked over to Mother Su. She greeted her grandmother before she circled around Su Yuran. Actually, Su Yuran also liked Little Eggshell. So, she was quite lucky because the two MO family treasures were also very obedient. By the way, why don't I go resign from Tangning's job? Otherwise, there's no need. I don't dislike the couple. Plus, you need friends. By being friends with Tangning, he could learn a lot and receive protection. There was nothing bad about it. But your Nangong family and MO family. While Little Eggshell and Mother Su weren't looking, Nangong Quan whispered beside Su Yuran's ear, "Is this considered being considerate of me?" Su Yuran's face turned red as she lowered her head. "I just don't think what I'm doing is right. To be able to earn money from the hands of my enemies is also a kind of ability. You don't need to resign." After speaking, Nangong Quan lifted his shirt and said to Su Yuran, "I'll leave Little Eggshell to you tonight." "Daddy, where are you going?" "Go to the company to work overtime. Tonight, Big Sister will tell you a story and coax you to sleep." Nangong Quan originally thought that Little Eggshell would be disappointed. But, to his surprise, she was unusually excited. It seemed he was destined to be lonely that night. "Mr. Nangong, it's already so late. Take care of yourself. Yuran, we are guests. How can we chase the host away?" Mother Su saw through Nangong Quan's intentions, so she quickly said, "We've done everything right. There's nothing to hide. Mr. Nangong, you can just say that we're distant cousins. That way, there won't be any problems. What do you think?" "Daddy, I can't sleep when you're not home." Little Eggshell's mischievous mind began to think. "Then don't go to the office," Su Yuran said calmly. Nangong Quan nodded his head. In reality, deep down, he didn't want to stay at the office on his own either. Afterwards, Su Yuran helped Mother Su sleep and told her everything that happened at the Su family home that day. After hearing this, Mother Su laughed. Give me the divorce papers to sign. Right now, the Su family is begging you. Mom, none of this belongs to me. Yuran, did you think I covet something from Mr. Nangong? I'm not that kind of person. I know that we're only staying here for a few days. I'm sure you'll find a good place to settle down. After hearing this, Su Yuran relaxed and nodded her head. Since you've thought it through, then we'll definitely get a divorce. A moment later, Su Yuran tried to sneak back into her room, but Nangong Kwan's bedroom door was wide open. Su Yuran knocked on the door and reminded him, "Do you want me to close it for you?" "No need, I'm used to it. Little Eggshell will come in anyway," Nangong Kwan replied. "You should get some rest. But aren't you afraid that I'll see something I shouldn't?" This man didn't know how to avoid suspicion. After all, there were 2 female guests in his home. If Eggshell can't see anything, then you won't either. Don't worry. After speaking, Nangong Kwan returned to his work. From the looks of it, taking over Springfall was a lot of pressure for Nangong Kwan. Su Yuran did not continue to disturb him. Instead, she quietly returned to her room and lay down on the unfamiliar bed. Everything that was happening in front of her seemed so surreal. Nangong Kwan lifted his head and looked at the door opposite him. He deliberately left it open so that he could appear in front of Su Yuran at any time. Wasn't that what love was all about? You wanted to see the other person at all times. The next day, Su Yuran returned to her normal work schedule. However, before she picked up the Mo twins, she first dropped little Eggshell off at school before returning to pick up the twins. As a result, a few days later, Tongning noticed that Su Yuran was also taking care of little Eggshell. So, she said to Su Yuran, "If the Nangong family doesn't mind, you can take little Eggshell with you and pick up my 2 sons. We can go to school together and save you the trouble of running back and forth." After hearing this, Su Yuran was shocked. "You found out? Did you think you could hide it from me?" "I'm sorry, Miss Tang. It's fine, I don't mind. Plus, my 2 rascals still owe little Eggshell a life-saving favor," Tongning said with a mysterious smile. "From now on, you can bring little Eggshell along to pick up Zishi and Zichin." Chapter 1142. Although this was what Tongning said, Su Yuran did not do it. After all, she cared more about Nangong Kwan's feelings. To be exact, she had unknowingly become more concerned about Nangong Kwan's feelings. So, she ended up taking little Eggshell and the Mo brothers to school separately. She had been staying at the Nangong family home for a few days now, but she hadn't actually seen Nangong Kwan that much. After all, he was quite busy. He had just returned to Beijing, so he didn't have as many years of experience as Mo Ting did. So, he had to do everything himself. Plus, little Eggshell had someone to take care of, so Nangong Kwan had more time to focus on work. This made Su Yuran waver a little. She felt like Nangong Kwan was simply saying it on a whim. But that night, just as she was about to return to her room, she bumped into Nangong Kwan on the stairs. As their eyes met, Su Yuran smiled. Just as she was about to return to her room, Nangong Kwan called out to her, "Are you free tomorrow night?" "Huh? Do you want to go watch a movie?" Nangong Kwan asked in seriousness. Su Yuran was a little surprised, but she quickly nodded her head. "Okay, let's meet outside the theater at 9 p.m. Since he couldn't let little Eggshell and Mother Su know, they had to go their separate ways. So, Nangong Kwan nodded his head and returned to his room. "Watch a movie." Su Yuran was a little annoyed by Nangong Kwan. This man had promised to treat her like a blind date, yet he had been busy with work for a few days and claimed that he wasn't interested in her. Now, he was asking her to watch a movie. Was this a man's trick? Was he playing hard to get? Regardless, Su Yuran still dressed up a little. She put on a little black dress and even tried on high heels. Although it was difficult to walk, she still arrived at the theater punctually at 9 p.m. By this time, Nangong Kwan had already arrived. Although he did not say a word when he saw Su Yuran dressed up like this, it was obvious that he was more used to her t-shirt and jeans. She looked more energetic that way. From now on, let's not go out like this. After hearing this, Su Yuran nodded her head. Okay. She also hated high heels. "Let's go in then." After speaking, Nangong Kwan extended his hand towards Su Yuran. Originally, he could have just sat in the VIP room and watched a movie with Su Yuran and Tongning. But he felt that Su Yuran preferred to get to know each other in a way that was close to life. So, even though they were about to be recognized, he insisted on taking Su Yuran to the cinema. At this time, a black car was parked not too far from the entrance of the theater. Inside the car sat an old man in his 60s with a head of white hair. As he watched Nan Gongquan and Su Yuran disappear into the distance, he cursed useless things. Instead of seeking revenge, he spent all his time flirting with girls. "Sir, we are about to set off. Let's go." The old man stomped his walking stick and directly ordered the driver to set off. "Investigate this woman's identity later, yes. My grandson has grown up and has completely forgotten the hatred of the Nangong family. But I won't forget. Fortunately, I can still do it myself. If I wait for the Nangong family to avenge me, I probably won't be able to do it in this lifetime." Looking at Nangongquan now, it was obvious why Chiu-Jin was so useless back then. So he deserved to die. At this time, Tongning and Mo Ting did not receive any news that Elder Nangong had already been released from prison. After all, everyone assumed that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Even Nangongquan didn't know about his grandfather's current situation. Because Elder Nangong had performed many meritorious deeds in prison and had his sentence reduced 4 times, he even made new friends. So, as soon as he was released, he changed his name and did not tell anyone. After all, he didn't want to trust anyone and was afraid that his enemies would seek revenge on him. It wasn't easy for him to recover from his illness in the U.S. When he heard that his grandson had returned, he originally thought that he would wait for him to seek justice for him. Who would have thought? All he saw was Nangongquan's love affair. What a disappointment. As expected, he could only rely on himself. He wanted to see just how impenetrable the Mo family that was led by Mo Ting was. Meanwhile, over at Tongning's side, preparations for the Ant Queen 2 were all set. All they were waiting for was a good day to start filming. The newly selected actors knew that acting in Tongning's film wasn't easy, so they were unusually humble and hardworking. Luo Sheng, in particular, had long been looking forward to acting in Tongning's film. Although he was personally discovered by Tongning, Tongning never chose roles based on favoritism. So, even if she personally brought him out, Tongning wouldn't consider him if he wasn't suitable. Of course, Tongning was personally involved in choosing the main cast and crew. But what about the rest of the crew? Elder Nangong used all sorts of channels to find out about Tongning's progress. But he only had one motive: to infiltrate the explosives team. If there was a chance for him to personally make a move, he definitely had to infiltrate the department that didn't seem suspicious, but had a lot of potential. All he had to do was arrange an accident, and Mo Ting would be able to survive. Because he had to hide his identity and not be recognized, Elder Nangong didn't even want to see his own grandson. However, he would occasionally tail him and discover that he was completely immersed in his love affair. Let's pick a good day. The Ant Queen 2 foot can officially start filming. Late at night, before the couple had gone to sleep, Tongning said in a daze as she nestled in Mo Ting's arms, "I can't wait to see you act as the villain." Mo Ting gently stroked Tongning's back as his lips curved upwards. As long as it was his wife's wish, he would definitely satisfy it. "Get some rest first. Let's discuss the time tomorrow." "Ting, although I know you're tired, I selfishly hope that you'll appear in every single one of my sci-fi films. You need to be my professional client. You'll only appear in my films. Just like how you'll only be my manager for the rest of your life." Mo Ting enjoyed this special method of possession because it meant that in Tongning's heart, he would always be one of a kind. "I'll do as you wish." After hearing this, Tongning suddenly opened her eyes and looked up at Mo Ting with a little infatuation and lust. Mo Ting was deeply attracted by the look in her eyes. Chapter 1143. Elder Nangong made a lot of friends while he was in prison. So, after he was released, he received help from his friends and spent a long time recovering from his illness in the U.S. Now that he was back, he used the surname Zeng to appear in front of the public. He even obtained a certificate to be an explosives technician so that he could sneak into Tongning's team. As for Nangon Quan, he was going to pretend that he didn't have a grandson. After watching the film, Nangon Quan and Su Yurin's relationship became a little closer. Originally, they both had ulterior motives for the film. Su Yuran simply liked having Nangon Quan by her side, but Nangon Quan didn't like watching American popcorn movies. He simply wanted to keep her company. That night, the couple returned home together. But as they arrived at the front door, Su Yuran said to Nangon Quan, "I'm going up first. You can come back later. I'm afraid little Eggshell is asleep by now, but my mom might not be." Su Yuran stuck her head out of the car and looked in the direction of Mother Su's bedroom. Seeing that the lights were off, she relaxed. "Okay, I'll get out of the car first." As Nangon Quan looked at her cautious expression, he did not get angry. He hoped that Su Yuran could experience the beauty of being in a relationship and not end up becoming an engaged couple like she said. Even though, in his heart, that was exactly what he had been hoping for all along. The couple entered the living room one after the other and returned to their respective rooms. But before they returned to their rooms, Nangon Quan suddenly grabbed onto Su Yuran and gave her a scare. "What's wrong?" Nangon Quan hugged Su Yuran for a few seconds before he let go. "Go to sleep." Su Yuran's heart raced like it was about to jump out of her throat. It had been a long time since she last felt this way. It wasn't that she didn't admire people when she was in the military, but she only admired them. She never thought about actually getting close to someone. But after being hugged by Nangon Quan, Su Yuran truly felt that she was in a relationship. She was in a relationship. Nangon Quan's embrace was extremely comforting. That night, the couple lay in their own beds, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. They were afraid of the sudden urge, so they tried their best to control themselves. As a result, Su Yuran woke up the next morning with a cold. But she still insisted on taking little Eggshell to school and planned to pick up the two rascals at the M.O. family home. But Nangon Quan stopped her. "Take little Eggshell with you. I'll take you there." "But I still need to go to Hyatt Regency." "I'll take you there," Nangon Quan replied smoothly before he pushed Su Yuran into the car. After his daughter and girlfriend settled into their seats, he finally drove off. "I've met M.O. Ting before. From my standpoint, I don't want to be enemies with him." It wasn't that Nangon Quan didn't have any hatred in his heart, but he knew that the M.O. family wasn't the main culprit. Su Yuran looked at Nangon Quan from the side and felt that this man was truly magnanimous. At least, if she was in his position, she might not be able to completely let go. "Little Eggshell, Daddy is great, right?" Su Yuran asked. "But I despise my daddy because he's not handsome enough," Little Eggshell said as she rested her chin on her hand. "He's not as handsome as the two boys' daddy." "Who said that?" Su Yuran immediately argued with Little Eggshell. Nangon Quan was calm and introverted. He looked like a man with a story. On top of that, his appearance was a little wild, so he exuded the elegance of a mature man. This was completely different to M.O. Ting's elegance. "Big sister, do you think my daddy is more handsome?" "Your daddy is more manly." At a time like this, Little Eggshell had no idea what manly meant. However, Nangon Quan's words were extremely effective. He had a feeling that this little brat was obviously teasing him. If it weren't for Little Eggshell, he would have already made a move on her. Soon, the three arrived at Hyatt Regency. Tongning stepped out with the two rascals. As she watched Su Yuran personally step out of the car to pick them up, she immediately guessed that there was someone in the car. "Is Little Eggshell here today?" "Uh-huh, I have a slight cold, so..." Su Yuran explained. "It's okay, go ahead," Tongning said as she handed the two kids to Su Yuran. Su Yuran looked at Tongning gratefully. This was one of the things she liked and admired about Tongning. According to Tongning's current status in Beijing, she could treat the people that worked for her in the most arrogant manner, but she never treated or looked down on the people around her. This was probably the most elegant thing that a woman could do. Little Eggshell was very obedient as she naturally gave up her seat to the M.O. twins. Meanwhile, as soon as M.O. Zishi boarded the car, he chatted with Little Eggshell while M.O. Zishi stared at Nangon Quan like an adult. Nangon Quan was surprised that a child could have such a gaze. So, he turned around and glanced at M.O. Zishi before he said to Su Yuran, "This child is very special." He is indeed very special, Su Yuran nodded. Su Yuran nodded her head. Zichin doesn't like to talk, but everyone thinks he understands what the adults are thinking. Unbelievable. During this time, Mo Zishi and Little Eggshell got into an argument. At this time, Mo Zichin suddenly stepped in front of Mo Zishi and looked at Little Eggshell cautiously. On the surface, Mo Zishi was the older brother, but there were a lot of times when Mo Zichin was the one protecting him. The most obvious thing was the scar on his left cheekbone not long ago, wasn't it? Soon, the three children entered the school, and Nangong Quan led Su Yuran home. However, just as they arrived at the front door, Nangong Quan suddenly grabbed onto Su Yuran's right hand as she unbuckled her seatbelt. What's wrong? Remember to take your medicine, Nangong Quan instructed. Okay, hurry and go to work, Su Yuran nodded her head. Su Yuran nodded her head and took a deep breath. I'll go home, take some medicine, and get some sleep. I should be fine after that. Nangong Quan placed his hand on her forehead. Before she could react, he had already stepped out of the car and carried her out. You have a fever. I'm really fine, Su Yuran quickly explained. I used to have a lot of colds in the past. I'll be fine after a while. That was in the past, but you have me now. After speaking, Nangong Quan carried Su Yuran into the living room. Luckily, Mother Su wasn't home, so Nangong Quan headed upstairs and placed Su Yuran on the bed in his room. Did you forget? I live across the street. Let's not talk about it for now. Let's focus on reducing your fever first. Nangong Quan ignored Su Yuran's protests as he pulled out some fever medicine. It'll affect your work. Only now do I know that falling in love can also make people lazy. Nangong Quan pulled out his phone and gave his assistant a phone call. I'll be arriving at the office later today. All he wanted to do was take care of Su Yuran. Chapter 1144. That morning, Hai Rui decided that the Ant Queen 2 would officially begin filming on the 1st of the following month. In reality, it was only a few days later. As the antagonist, Emo Ting naturally had to make preparations. But because Hai Rui was in a stable state and Fang Yu and Lu Che were doing well, Emo Ting had time to spare. No one thought that the big boss would lose face by acting. After all, everyone in Beijing knew that Emo Ting was only willing to appear on screen because of Tongning. This wife-doting demon. As long as Tongning wanted something, there was nothing he wouldn't do, so acting in a film wasn't a big deal. The media followed up on Hai Rui's announcement and conducted interviews with all the actors involved. Even Old Long was prepared to give it his all. After all, who would dare to not treat Tongning's film well? As Su Yuran lay in her bedroom and watched the news, she turned to look at Nangong Quan. Tongning is quite good at making films. A good film is the result of a team's hard work. It's not right to put all the credit on Tongning alone. But I can't deny that Tongning has perseverance, Nangong Quan said like he was looking at a piece of gossip. The Ant Queen's first film had such a difficult environment, yet she managed to produce it. She's indeed very serious. Nangong Quan, I really want to know if you feel unsettled by President Mo's achievements. Mo Ting relied on himself to get where he is today. Nangong Quan knew this better than anyone. His talent isn't something that anyone can compare to. After hearing this, Su Yuran suddenly felt that the relationship between him and Mo Ting was like that between two heroes, and they appreciated each other. Nangong Quan admired Mo Ting, and Mo Ting naturally didn't dislike Nangong Quan. Actually, whether you're friends or competitors, the sparks between the two of you are bound to be very interesting. Stop talking. Take your medicine first. Nangong Quan turned off the noisy TV and placed the medicine in front of Su Yuran. If you want Little Eggshell to return to her room before school ends, you need to listen to me. Su Yuran's face turned red, and she didn't know what to say. This man obviously looked like a gentleman, but at times like this he was extremely domineering. It was almost too much for her. Yuran, hurry up. Okay, I understand. Su Yuran nodded her head, lay down on the bed, and fell asleep. Of course, Nangong Quan did not make things difficult for her. After she fell asleep, he carried her back to his room. As for the task of picking up the three kids, he naturally left it to him. However, his actions completely infuriated old man Nangong. It was one thing that Nangong Quan didn't hold a grudge against him, and he wouldn't actually lay a hand on his grandson. But Nangong Quan actually picked the two kids up from school. Could it be that he had forgotten everything that had happened to the Nangong family? Let's go. The old man said to the driver angrily, "Young Master Nangong, this is too disappointing." The driver echoed, "Old mister, don't be too angry. If we don't give him a warning, he seems to have forgotten who he is." After saying that, Elder Nangong took out his phone and dialed a familiar number. He also instructed the person on a few things. Nangong Quan had no idea that Elder Nangong would be so disgusted by his act of sending the two kids to school for Su Yuran. 3 days later, the Ant Queen 2 held its opening ceremony. It wasn't as difficult as it was during the filming of the Ant Queen 1. Now, Tongning could easily get her hands on any resources she wanted, but she still treasured her actors and actresses. During the opening ceremony, Old Long was dressed in a white shirt, but it couldn't hide his perfect figure. Standing in the middle of the stage were a few new actors, while Tongning was seated on the left. Mo Ting had no time to attend the opening ceremony. A large number of fans sent their blessings to the Ant Queen 2. Everyone wanted Tongning to finish filming in one day. That day, Elder Nangong attended a photo shoot with the production crew. His surname was Nao Zeng. After putting on some makeup, he made himself look 10 years younger and pretended that he had been in the U.S. for many years in the field of explosives. No one discovered his identity as an explosives technician. Everyone treated Elder Nangong like he was a family member. Meanwhile, Elder Nangong looked at the main cast on stage and revealed a friendly smile. All he was waiting for was an opportunity. Even though he couldn't contain his excitement and wanted to blow up the entire set, for the sake of the Ant Queen 2, Hai Rue invested a lot of effort and money. They even built a base for the Ant Queen 2 and a few other buildings. Most of the Ant Queen 2's filming would take place here. Mo Ting was the last to enter the set. His scenes were mostly in the second half of the film, while he only needed to appear in the first half of the film. So if Elder Nangong wanted to wait for this opportunity, he would need to stay on set for quite some time. Even so, Elder Nangong did not forget to remind his grandson of his identity. So, during this period of time, he frequently ordered people to place a photo of Nangong Quan's parents in Nangong Quan's car to remind him of the cause of his parents' death. Sometimes, he would even spray graffiti on Nangong Quan's car. In short, he wanted his grandson to remember everything that Nangong Quan had forgotten. Have you found out who did it? Su Yuran noticed that Nangong Quan had been quiet lately because of the photo, so she couldn't help but ask, "Why did these photos suddenly appear in my car?" Nangong Quan put away the photo and replied, "It's probably because someone was bored. Who would play a prank like this? I refuse to believe that the person behind this has no ulterior motives. This is a reminder." Nangong Quan looked down at the photo of his parents and replied, "It's a reminder for me not to forget about my blood feud. But Xiujin is already dead. I will find out who did it." "Don't worry," Nangong Quan comforted. "As long as you and Little Eggshell are safe, leave everything else to me." "I'm just worried about you," Su Yuran comforted. Su Yuran held on to Nangong Quan's hand and said, "It wasn't easy for you to forget everything." Nangong Quan did not say a word, because, just like Su Yuran said, it wasn't easy for him to forget everything. He didn't want to remember everything again. Chapter 1145. Because of this, Nangong Quan investigated the person that placed the photo in his car. But because the person was extremely cautious, he did not find any clues. Elder Nangong was, after all, an experienced man. So, when he did something like this, he naturally didn't leave any evidence behind. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to live up to his reputation. Little brat, all he does is indulge in women, and he even sent someone to investigate me. What an ingrate. Elder Nangong was even more displeased with Nangong Quan. But even though he was displeased, he was still related to Nangong Quan. So he couldn't really do anything to the only descendant of the Nangong family. As for Su Yuran, he had already investigated her. Although her background wasn't good enough for Nangon Quan, she claimed that she came from the military and was skilled. Thinking about the genes of his future great-grandchildren, he reluctantly agreed to let the two of them get together. But Elder Nangong was not happy that Su Yuran was working for the Mo family. But he wasn't in a rush. After the explosion was completed, he would return to the Nangong family and teach his useless grandson a lesson. Over the past few days, the Ant Queen 2 had already begun filming. But because the early stages of filming were mainly non-acting, Elder Nangong spent his time on the set of the Ant Queen 2. He would either sneak a peek at the actors' scripts or sneak a peek at Old Long and the others. I never thought that a little brat would come up with something so decent. She's definitely better than the rascal at home. Oomph! The script was well written, but of course, Elder Nangong could only see part of it. After all, opportunities like this were hard to come by. Even if they didn't get the chance to do the explosion and the script was leaked, Hai Rui would still suffer for a while. Tongning visited the set frequently because she wanted to confirm the acting skills of the young actors, especially Luo Sheng, the amateur that she pulled out from the group. After so much training, he was actually able to act well with Old Long. After seeing this, Tongning was quite pleased. But there was another reason why she visited the set frequently. She wanted to encourage the lead actors. Perhaps there wasn't a single person in Beijing that didn't know how much she valued the Ant Queen 2. All you do is play basketball all day. You have no idea what I need. This scene was between Luo Sheng and Old Dragon. The two were father and son, but also teacher and student. Luo Sheng's character, Little Chiu, was naturally rebellious. In fact, he even went down the wrong path and helped the villain. Old Long was an honest physical education teacher. In fact, he had another identity, which was a retired undercover agent. Anyway, don't flirt with the girls in class right under my nose. A student should behave like a student. Since we're out on an outing, we need to relax. What's wrong with me being friends with a female classmate? With a cigarette dangling from Luo Sheng's mouth, he looked at his father in disdain. Even the way you stand is so annoying. If you have the guts, go to school and sue me. The old dragon was so enraged that he gave Luo Sheng a good beating. In a fit of anger, Luo Sheng left the group in a fit of rage. However, he had no idea that he had stumbled into a cave in his haste. The story of the Ant Queen 2 began. There was a lot of tension between the father and son, and the expression on Luo Sheng's face when he entered the mutated ant's cave was full of shock and fear. The scene froze here. Cut. Good. Let's get ready for the next scene, Miss Chiao said as she stood up. As she spotted Tongning standing not too far away, she ran over excitedly and said, "Out of all the new actors, Luo Sheng is the most hardworking. I'm guessing he's afraid that he'll embarrass you. He's always been good at seizing opportunities, so I'm not surprised at all that he has such an effect. But the other newcomers all have their own difficulties. It's hard to explain in a few words. It's best if you find an opportunity to communicate with them." After hearing this, Tongning nodded her head. Okay. The others weren't lazy either, but they were always lacking something. Either they were talented, or they hadn't been pressured like Luo Sheng. Of course, Mo Ting still hadn't joined the set yet, because his scenes would be focused on filming. But because of this, Elder Nangong ended up staying on set for a good few months at a time. In the following days, Elder Nangong stopped sending people to place photos in Nangong Quan's car. He had no time to take care of his grandson, so he had to keep an eye out for opportunities on set. But Nangong Quan did not give up on his search for the person who placed the photos. Over the past few days, the Su family had reached the end of their road. Father Su couldn't find any funds, so he couldn't turn the Su family around. Meanwhile, Su Yuran's Annie wasn't doing too well either. Nangong Quan had promised to hire a team of lawyers to deal with the situation, and he did just that. By now, Su Yuran's Annie's reputation was completely ruined because she seduced her brother-in-law and tried to kick her sister out of the family. On top of that, she was in charge of divorce cases. She was an unscrupulous scumbag. Because of this, Father Su contacted Su Yuran and Mother Su multiple times to avoid his debts, but they ignored him. Left with no choice, Father Su had no choice but to pawn the Su family home. Otherwise, he would have no way out. As soon as Nangong Quan heard that the Su family was going to auction off the property, he naturally wanted to buy it. At least, he felt that Su Yuran and Mother Su would love it. He was just wondering what gift to give Su Yuran, but now he had one. But because he found out that Nangong Quan was the buyer, Father Su went straight to Springfall and begged Nangong Quan to see Su Yuran and Mother Su. Although Nangong Quan didn't want to see the scumbag, he did not make the decision himself. Instead, he personally gave Su Yuran a phone call. Mr. Su is currently at my agency. Would you like to see him? Let's meet outside. I'm afraid he'll dirty your territory. Su Yuran replied. Dress yourself up before you come out to see him, Nangong Quan cautiously reminded. At least, he needed Su Yuran to act like a rich woman that had married into a rich family. That way, Father Su would be devastated. Su Yuran nodded her head. Not only did she dress herself up, she also dressed up Mother Su. They agreed to meet at a place not far from Springfall, because it was the safest way. Papa Su would never have imagined that after leaving him, the mother and daughter were living like fish in water. They were covered in jewels and jewels, as if they had become the wives of nobles. Why did you want to see us? Speak. After arriving at the cafe, Su Yuran said coldly to Father Su, Why isn't my good Andy here? Yuran, I'm at my wit's end. Please save me. Father Su said as he knelt in front of Mother Su. Papa Su knelt in front of Mama Su and begged, I know you have money now. You can save Daddy. Save you? Why should I? Chapter 1146. Look, you've married into a rich family, and you don't have to worry about food and clothes, but I don't even have a place to sleep. Father Su cried. Yuran, I've wronged you and your mother in the past, but you can't just stand by and watch me die. You're allowed to wrong us, but we can't wrong you. Su Yuran's eyes turned red. Dad, this is the last time I'm going to call you Dad. Afterwards, she pulled out a few $100s from her wallet and placed it in front of Father Su. This is my last mercy. After speaking, Su Yuran turned her head and looked elsewhere. Seeing that his daughter's request was useless, Father Su turned to Mother Su and begged, Wifey, save me. Don't forget, we've already signed our divorce papers, Mother Su said realistically. Mother Su told Father Su very realistically, so my suggestion is that you look for my sister. After all, you guys have been together for so many years. She will definitely save you. Wifey, don't look for me or Yuran again. I'd rather die than help you. So, even if you die on your knees in front of me, it's useless. Mother Su suddenly yelled. Indeed, Yuran has a good boyfriend, but it has nothing to do with you. Do you remember how you've treated Yuran all these years? Father Su was stunned as he knelt in front of the mother and daughter helplessly. You guys are my only hope. When you were being intimate with that slut in front of me, why wasn't I your only hope? When you called that slut and kicked me over and over again, why didn't you say that I was your only hope? If you still had a bit of conscience, you wouldn't have ended up like this today. Hope? That's something that no longer exists between us. After hearing this, Su Yuran suddenly regretted taking out a few $100s. She had never seen her mother explode in anger, nor had she ever heard her cry out for help. What right did this jerk have to receive help from others? Yuran, wifey, if you don't help me, I'm going to die. Father Su shamelessly threatened to kill himself. But, at this time, Nangong Quan walked into the cafe, dressed in a smart suit, and approached the mother and daughter. Have you come to an agreement? Su Yuran pointed at Father Su with her chin and humphed. He said, without us, he would die. From Su Yuran's eyes, Nangong Quan could tell that she couldn't bear to watch. So, he patted her on the shoulder and comforted. Take Annie out first. I have something to say to Mr. Su. Su Yuran glanced at Father Su and nodded her head. I'll leave it to you then. After speaking, Su Yuran pushed Mother Su out of the cafe. As soon as the mother and daughter left, Nangong Quan sat down in front of Father Su. I know Yuran is very kind, but I'm not. Mr. Su, I'm sure you've heard that I killed someone in the U.S. Nangong Quan deliberately used this incident to threaten Father Su. When Papa Su heard this, his palms began to sweat. So, paying off your debt is my bottom line. As for you asking for millions or even tens of millions, are you willing to live the rest of your life without worries? I'm sorry, that's not possible. I'm only doing this for Uran's sake. If you continue to pester Uran and her mother, you can forget about anything else. What do you think, Mr. Sue? But what am I going to rely on in the future? Father Sue still wanted to live a good life. That's up to you. Whether you want to work or beg, it's up to you. After speaking, Nangong Quan stood up without saying another word to Father Sue. This jerk didn't even deserve to be called a human. All Tongning hoped was that from now on, he would distance himself from Su Yuran and her mother. Father Sue sat on the floor dispiritedly, but there was nothing he could do. At least, Nangong Quan had paid off his debt for him, so he no longer had to hide. As for how he was going to live from now on, he would have to look for his old mistress. At the very least, she was a lawyer. But he had no idea that Su Yuran's Annie had locked herself up at home for 3 days straight. It was simple. She was too ashamed to do anything. She seduced her brother-in-law and abused her sister. She did all of the disgusting things she did. Of course, the bugs had to stick together to prevent them from harming others. Afterwards, even though Father Sue's matter was resolved, Su Yuran was not happy. Seeing that she did not say a word after returning home, Nangong Quan began to tell her about his past. When I was in my teens, my family was turned upside down and my parents passed away. To protect my life, I had no choice but to leave my hometown and go to the U.S. I worked in a poor area on my own as an apprentice in a store. Then, I accidentally beat a local tyrant to death. As soon as I went to prison, I felt like my life was going to end like this. The first 30 years of my life were a blur. It wasn't until little Eggshell was born that I saw myself clearly. I wanted to raise this child well, and she was my only motivation to live. So, Yuran, you're much luckier than me. At least, and he treats you wholeheartedly. After hearing Nangong Quan's words, Su Yuran suddenly hugged him from behind. Now that you're saying this, I'm starting to blame the Mo family. That's why, sometimes, I admire you for being able to let go of your hatred. That's because I believe that no one else can dictate their own fate. If you want to live a good life, then you need to work hard. There's no point blaming anyone else. The Mo family didn't do anything wrong, even if they destroy my family. Don't say any more. Su Yuran hugged him tighter. Don't say any more. My heart hurts. From now on, you won't just have little Eggshell, you'll also have me. We'll both be by your side. Nangong Quan honestly revealed the dark side of his life. He even included the part where he went to prison. He wanted Su Yuran to understand everything about him. Su Yuran admired Nangong Quan's breadth of mind. Because of this, she began to understand and cherish Nangong Quan even more. I will definitely help you protect little Eggshell and make sure she grows up healthy and happy. In that case, you need to help her have a happy family first. Nangong Quan said with a deeper meaning, Yuran, marry me. After we get married, we can slowly fall in love. I can make up for everything that you're missing. But I'm almost 40 years old. Can you understand the psychological crisis of an old man? But what if I change my mind? If one day you feel like I'm not treating you well and want to leave, you can leave at any time. I won't force you, Nangong Quan promised. But I won't give you the chance to regret. Chapter 1147. In that case, I'll take a gamble. Su Yuran replied decisively. Gamble? Su Yuran used such a reckless word. I definitely won't let you lose, Nangong Quan promised. My promise to you will always be valid. Su Yuran buried her head in Nangong Quan's arms as he hugged her tightly. Although he looked tough on the outside, his heart was burning with passion. I'm sorry, I don't have the patience to wait any longer. I want to marry you right now. As soon as their marriage was decided, Su Yuran personally arrived at Hyatt Regency the next day to resign from Tongning. Although Nangong Quan didn't care, she cared a lot. When she thought about Nangong Quan's lonely life, she couldn't help but blame the Mo family. So, she couldn't continue working for Tongning. Can I ask why? Tongning asked even though she already knew the answer. In reality, she wanted to know how far their relationship had progressed. But because it wasn't easy to find a good person like Su Yuran, she naturally cared a little more about her. If Miss Tang is worried about the kid's safety, I can recommend my friend. I'm sure she can do the job. But Tongning shook her head and smiled. I'm not asking this because I'm worried about the kids. I'm simply concerned about you. Yuran, I want you to be happy. Su Yuran nodded her head. Actually, this had nothing to do with Tongning and Mo Ting. The couple's character and integrity were 1 in 100, so there was no need for her to take it to heart. It's because I'm getting married, Su Yuran replied. I'm getting married to Nangong Quan. He's been on his own for so many years. I want to be by his side, Su Yuran said with a happy smile. We are both lonely people. Since that's the case, I wish you both the best, Tongning said as she hugged Su Yuran. Tongning stretched out her arms and gave Su Yuran a hug. From now on, you'll only be giving little eggshell. My 2 rascals are going to be jealous. Thank you, Miss Tang. Tongning shook her head. There's no need to thank me. It's fate that we met. Su Yuran said her goodbyes to the 2 babies and left Hyatt Regency out of respect. Although Tongning felt it was a pity, she could sense that Nangong Quan truly needed Su Yuran. After all, both of them needed warmth. That night, Mo Ting returned home, and Tongning told him about what had happened. When the time comes, send him a congratulatory gift, even though Nangong Quan might not necessarily want it. Mo Ting held on to his 2 sons as he listened to his wife. When the time comes, get Lu Che to make arrangements. By the way, I will be joining the crew tomorrow. I know. Daddy, Big Sis doesn't want us anymore, Mo Zichi said with a pout. Of course, Mo Zichin didn't say much, nor did he express his displeasure. After all, it wasn't like he could make the decision. It's not that Big Sis doesn't want to abandon you. Big Sis also has the right to be happy, Tongning comforted her sons. Mommy will carry you, okay? Dad has to film tomorrow, and it will be very tiring. Let him have a good rest. Mo Zichi looked at his brother and then at his father. He then slid out of Mo Ting's arms and led his brother to the playroom. After the 2 rascals left, Mo Ting wrapped his arms around Tongning and placed a kiss on her forehead. The 2 rascals are very sensible. Of course, don't you know who taught them that? Okay, I'm going to go wash up. I'll be joining the crew tomorrow morning. Tongning nodded her head and planted a kiss on Mo Ting's lips. My villain, I'm looking forward to your performance. Mo Ting patted her on the head. Even though she was already 30 years old, he still treated her like the young and inexperienced woman from the past. Afterwards, Tongning went to take care of Yan. This was the tacit understanding between the couple. As soon as they heard that Mo Ting was joining the crew, the staff on set of the Ant Queen 2 cheered. It wasn't common to see a big boss filming a film. Yet, this man's acting was outstanding. If it wasn't for Tongning, they would never have known that President Mo's acting skills were so outstanding. Apart from a staff who wanted to catch a glimpse of Mo Ting, the actors were also extremely excited. For example, Mo Ting's previous work, whether it was Emperor in ancient costume, with Tongning or the Ant Queen 1, he had always amazed everyone. When on Earth did he hone his acting skills? No one could get an answer. Early in the morning, the crew prepared to hold a welcome party for Mo Ting. But Mo Ting didn't like it this way. He simply told everyone to focus on what they needed to focus on. Everyone thought that big bosses like to suck up to others. But after joining the crew, Mo Ting was merely an actor. So he had higher expectations for the people around him. As a result, Luo Sheng and Mo Ting had their first scene together. For Luo Sheng, this was a pleasant surprise. When it came to Mo Ting, apart from respect, he was also a little timid. Whenever he saw Mo Ting, he would feel nervous and afraid. As a result, Luo Sheng failed multiple times in his first scene. In the Ant Queen 2, Xiao Qiu greatly admired Mo Ting. He also wanted to break free from his father's control and become a person that could do whatever he wanted. So, in this scene with Mo Ting, he needed to be obedient as the couple stood in a dark tunnel. Mo Ting's character, Meng Sun, demanded that Xiao Qiu learn how to resist. But Xiao Qiu was very timid, so Meng Sun continued to provoke him. Hit me. Hit me hard. Pretend that I'm your father. Take out all the pain you've suffered on me." As soon as Mo Ting got in character, he went from a respectable CEO to a gangster-like hooligan. His entire body emitted an unbearable sense of danger. Just from looking at his eyes, one could feel a sense of eeriness and fear. "Cut! Luo Sheng, you don't look too good," Xiao Man said as she helped him up. "Don't be nervous. I'm sorry, director. Please give me some time." Mo Ting was too powerful for Luo Sheng to handle. Mo Ting noticed Luo Sheng's state. So after he finished touching up his makeup, Mo Ting approached him and asked, "Do you know what the highest level of acting is?" "Transcendent." After hearing this, Mo Ting shook his head. "Where can I find perfection?" "It's simple. You need to live like this person. Only when you become Xiao Qiu will you no longer be acting. Whether it's me, Tongning, Lin Sheng, or Bei Chendong, as soon as you get into character, you will become that person and no longer be yourself." Chapter 1148. Let me show you a demonstration. I will now act as Xiao Qiu. Mo Ting said to Luo Sheng. "In that case, do you need someone to help you?" Mo Ting shook his head as he stood up and walked over to his sandbag. At this time, Oolong spoke up for Mo Ting. Hit me hard." Mo Ting immediately put on a submissive expression as he raised his hand and walked over to the sandbag. As if it was someone he was acting with, he gave it a probing punch. "Hit him hard. Did you not eat?" The old dragon cooperated again. As Mo Ting sobbed, he stretched out his fists. As he cried, he vented his emotions. Unknowingly, his fists became heavier and heavier, until everyone heard a loud cry of relief. At that moment, the entire world fell silent. From the moment Mo Ting's emotions were built up to the moment he exploded, it only took a few seconds for him to go from weak to defiant. In fact, the pain and grievance he felt came from the bottom of his heart. After seeing this, Luo Sheng was shocked. The other minor actors were also shocked. What was acting? On his first day, Mo Ting had already given them a shocking lesson. Because of this, the production crew couldn't help but be impressed. Because of this, the production crew were reminded of how Tongning had previously tried her best to bring her emotions into her scenes. It was almost like the person she was playing wasn't her, but was herself. Old Long stood to the side with a smile. It seemed Mo Ting had once again locked onto this year's Fei Tian Award for Best Actor. The couple were born to be in the entertainment industry. Not too far away, Elder Nangong watched quietly as everything happened on set. He had a thoughtful smile on his face. After waiting for so long, his efforts were finally not in vain. Of course, at the moment, most of the scenes were non-acting and the most shocking scenes had yet to happen. So, the explosives technician was still in charge of other projects. This was requested by Elder Nangong. He claimed that he liked to be on set throughout the entire process because that way, he could better understand the film. But, since Mo Ting was already on set, it seemed his death wasn't too far away. Because of Mo Ting's arrival, the entire production crew became more serious and energetic. Most importantly, the other minor actors also quickly got into character. After all, they learned a lot from Mo Ting. I really admire President Mo. With his status, he's just like any other actor. He eats and lives with us and doesn't receive any special treatment. That's why he's able to sit on the big boss's seat. Tongning is the same. The two of them seem to be serious about everything they do. To live a fulfilling life every day, you're really amazing. After a day of filming, Tongning personally drove over to the set to pick up President Mo from work. The people on set couldn't help but tease, "Miss Tang, you are way too punctual. Can't you let President Mo stay on set a little longer?" Tongning also laughed. "I've let you guys look at it all day. It's time for me to look at it too, right? I'm lovesick." They're showing off their affection, Mo Ting did not have the time to chat. He quickly changed his clothes and transformed back into his usual self. He then helped Tongning into the car and sat in the driver's seat. "Rest if you're tired. I'll drive. This is a man's right and responsibility." Mo Ting laughed. Tongning shook her head helplessly. Just as she was about to say something, she noticed Elder Nangong standing behind Luo Sheng, looking at his script. Tang Ming furrowed her brows. She had no impression of this old man. "Have you seen him before?" Tang Ming asked. Mo Ting followed Tang Ming's gaze and shook his head. "I'll find out if I ask." What kind of rule was this for a staff member to peek at an actor's script? Of course, Tang Ming did not say anything. She simply told Mo Ting to investigate first. While the Ant Queen 2 was in full swing, Parasite wasn't to be outdone either. Nangong Quan was extremely satisfied with the progress of filming. Ever since he confirmed his marriage, Nangong Quan's life had undergone a drastic change. It was like he had lost a sense of melancholy and gained a sense of pureness. As a result, everyone in the agency began to wonder if Nangong Quan was in love, but they had never heard that he was in contact with anyone. So, they simply had no idea that Su Yuran was already living in his home. At that moment, the happiest person was Little Eggshell. Ever since Su Yuran revealed her relationship with Nangong Quan, Little Eggshell had begun to call her mommy. Su Yuran was elated to hear Little Eggshell call her mommy. However, the fact that the Mo family's 2 kids were sent to and from school instead of Little Eggshell caused a few rumors to spread. Of course, because the children did not know that the 2 boys were Mo Ting's children, most of the ridicule was directed towards the 2 rascals. That big sister doesn't want you guys anymore. Kevin's little brother is an ugly freak. Because he used an English name at school, Mo Zishi was called Kevin. The students ostracized Mo Zichin because the scar on his face wasn't completely healed. As soon as he heard his classmates talk about his little brother like that, Mo Zishi immediately stood up with his hands on his hips. "If you insult my little brother again, I'm going to beat you up." Mo Zichin immediately pulled Mo Zishi back and ignored him. But a moment later, the sound of a child crying could be heard in the classroom. The teacher immediately went forward to take a look, only to see that the child had tripped because the seat was tied together by a rope. Mo Zishi looked at Mo Zichin, but Mo Zichin acted like nothing had happened. It seemed from this point onwards, the 2 brothers developed a tacit understanding. On the surface, Mo Zishi pretended to protect his little brother and bluffed, while Mo Zichin secretly made a move to protect the 2 brothers. This meant, between the 2 brothers, Mo Zichin was the one with the ability to make a move. The teacher searched for half a day, but still couldn't find the culprit. So, she refused to believe that the kids in the class could be so smart at such a young age. The 2 brothers were the powerless type in the class. However, this didn't make them feel inferior. It was as if they knew they had a powerful background, so they never took the bullying of the other children seriously. When you find out who my parents are one day, you're going to be scared to death. Little Eggshell felt a little guilty. After all, she was the one who stole Su Yuran away, causing the 2 brothers to be the target of criticism from their classmates. They even said that their tutors didn't want them. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.